How many people here, is anybody here who's not a ham? Okay, good. Yeah. Is anybody here that does not have a DMR radio? Anybody here that bought their first DMR radio within the last 5 months? All right, good. Good to know my audience. Excellent. So that's why we have the first part of the presentation here today, is to go over some basics, to lay some groundwork, to remind ourselves a few things for those of us who have been in DMR for a while. And then we're going to go through the concepts that you need to program your radio. We're going to talk about some realities, some reality checks, because today we're going to be focusing on the non-Motorola / Kindred radios, aka the Chinese radios. And anybody who's been around DMR and amateur radio for any length of time knows that going in on the Chinese radio side of the house is an adventure. I think that's the most PC way that I could say it. It is not a Motorola experience. And you have to know where the pout holes are, where the speed bumps are, what the gotchas are, or you could end up having a very, very frustrating time. We're here to help. That's what we're part of what we're doing today. All right. I always start every DMR presentation that I give with what I call Mike's Dmr Doctrine. Especially if you have been in amateur radio for a while and you're just getting into DMR, this is the first thing that I like to say. First of all, DMR is a commercial radio protocol. It was never designed or intended for amateur radio use. Okay? Please turn off all your radios. During the course of the presentation, I promise you will have a chance to turn them on once we get to a certain point in the workshop. Some things about DMR are not going to make sense to you. This is expected. Accept this. It will make your life easier. It's going to be different. It is a commercial protocol. We are shoehorning it into amateur radio use. We're having to make sure that we comply with all amateur radio requirements, such as no encryption. Okay, I get asked that question about once a month. Hey, what do we do about encryption in amateur radios? You don't. End of discussion. Okay? There are some things that aren't going to make sense. All right. That said, the agenda for today, basics review. We're going to talk about exactly what you need to know to get your radio programmed. We're going to go through the programming workflow because there is a workflow. It's not a complicated one, but knowing the workflow is going to make things easier for you to handle and cause you less frustration. And then we're going to talk about some differences between vendors and the CPSs that they have, because there are differences and it can get crazy. Sir?
Presentation is on the RMHAM website under Rocky Mountain Ham University course syllabus.
Thank you, John. So if you want to get that goes on the Zoom call, if you're here and you want to pull down a copy of the presentation, it's on the website on the RMHAM menu for in course syllabus. Okay. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Let's start out with the basics review. I've been having fun with my subtitles. All right. No. But I might be able to help you program your radio. Okay, what is DMR and what is this turbo thing? Because we still get questions about turbo from time to time. DMR, oddly enough, stands for Digital Mobile Radio. Who knew? Right? It's an international commercial radio protocol, and it's a standard that was created by ETSI, which is actually in Europe. Yes, this is actually European. It's not even American. Imagine that, right? So it's an international standard. Okay? Now, if we talk about turbo, turbo tends to refer to Moto Turbo, which is Motorola's implementation of DMR. So they'll wrap some things around DMR, some extra things, most notably IP Site Connect, things where you can make your repeaters talk to each other, which aren't part of the DMR protocol, but it's something they add on to make things easier for the people that have to deploy this stuff. Okay? They're not one and the same, right? A lot of the amateur radio networks you have use Moto Turbo equipment, which is why you see this Moto Turbo thing a lot. It's not so much of a thing now, but in the early days it was very, very confusing. You don't have to have a Motorola Moto Turbo radio in order to participate on these repeaters. So we got that question a lot early on. It's not, don't have to worry about it. I have the cheapest, Radiata-E available on Amazon radios you can get, and these work fine as long as you're within range of a repeater, more or less, yeah. Again, there's some differences between radios and vendors, which we will get into a little bit later. All right, so what's the big deal about DMR? Why is this blown up? Why is this so popular? So the first thing is that it's digital. It's right there in the name, right? So we're sending digital data over the radio. There's equipment in the radios that takes your analog digital voice, converts it into a digital signal, converts it into packets, which are communicated over the airwaves as packets, as digital data. The receipt gets to the repeater, which is then repeated out. It gets to another radio where the packets are decoded, turned back into audio, comes out your radio. That is a gross simplification, but that is the basics of what it works. So the cool thing about this is that when you get the audio out, you're not getting the interference noise that you would get on an analog signal, the hissing, those kind of things. What you do get from time to time is what we call going robotic, or going digital, or going R2D2. There's a lot of different names. When you start getting out to the outer edge of the range of your radio, and the signal degrades to the point where the packets get corrupted, and that's where the signal, right? That's when you know you're out of range. So the signal clarity goes right out to the outer range of what the radio can do, and then just kind of drops off. Whereas in an analog, the quality kind of goes down linearly. The digital stays clear right up until it's not, right? So generally speaking, on a digital radio, you will be clearer longer than you will on an analog radio, which is one of the reasons why you go digital in the first place. Everybody remembers going, when we went from, I think most of us are old enough for this, right? Going from vinyl discs to cassette tapes to CDs. Same kind of concept, right? Well, I wasn't going to mention that. I wasn't going to date you there, Willem, but yes, 8 tracks as well. There you go. That's true. It's very true. So that's the first thing, digital. The second thing is that DMR has this wonderful technology built into it that's different from other systems. It's TDMA versus FDMA. What this basically does is it allows the radio to logically split itself in two. Okay? So you get a concept of what's called time slots or repeater slots. They're the same thing. Don't let anybody tell you that differently. They're the same thing. They're just two different labels, depending on who you talk to. Don't get me started. But what this allows you to do is take one repeater, one physical repeater, and logically split it into two separate repeaters to where two sets of people can be having two separate conversations on the same frequency pair at the same time and not interfere with each other. Okay? The other thing that's really cool, and this is one of the benefits of being a commercial radio technology, is that every single DMR repeater is narrowband, because commercial in this country has to be narrowband by law. So if you have a wideband frequency allocation, and we're talking logically here, a wideband repeater allocation of 25 kilohertz, you can actually break that into two 12.5 kilohertz sections, right, and put two repeaters in it. And then our one repeater acts as two, so we can, in the space of one wideband analog frequency allocation, you can have now with two DMR repeaters, you can have 4 separate conversations in the same space. That's really why this is blown up, because this is fantastic stuff. This is why we care. Okay? Add to that when you buy a Motorola Moto Turbo repeater, you've got the IP Site Connect built in, IP connectivity between the routers, and you've got a ready-built system for doing repeater networks. Questions on that basics? Yes, sir, Doug? Oh, really now? Yep. Yep. The questions on those basics. This may be the first time some of you have seen that, but this is why this kind of reality is why this is going to be different when you start to go setting your radio up to get it working with this kind of stuff. But the concepts are different. Okay. Now the first concept that we have in this is not new. You still have a frequency pair. You might see some frequencies though that are a little weirder than you're used to. It goes out to more digits. 443.2275. Well, there's 4 of them there. No, it's just a frequency. Don't panic. Okay. So the frequency pair on a repeater for transmit and receive 5 megahertz apart, still the same on UHF frequencies. That doesn't change. Everything else does. So once you get past that point, you take all the analog stuff and you kind of like set it aside. And now we have to learn the new stuff. First thing, we have this thing called a color code, which is a number. Okay? The color code serves the same purpose as your DCS or CTC SS tone. The difference is that it's not a tone. I had this argument with the guy before. It's like, it's just like a tone. No, it's not just a tone because it's not a tone. Right? Remember when I said we're transmitting digital information? This is a number inside the packet header. Right? So when the repeater gets that packet, it looks at the header, looks at that thing, and if the color code doesn't match what it has set, it ignores the packet. Right? It's not a tone. There's no tone in there at all. It's a packet. It's digital information. Okay? It's all digital. Now we have this thing we talked about having the 2 separate logical repeaters inside the DMR repeater. We talked about a repeater slot or time slot. That's new. So when you program your channel, you have to know which repeater slot you want to use. Because we have this thing called talk groups. Oh, talk groups. So talk groups are a way of dividing the repeater slot even further. So you can have certain radios that are set on time slot 1, talk group 3, and other radios that are time slot 1, talk group 4, and if they're set up correctly, those 2 people can't talk to each other even though they're on the same time slot. They can't talk at the same time, but they'll be separated from each other. So you have to know what talk group you want to talk on, which repeater slot that talk group is on for the radio. You have to know the color code of the repeater, and you have to know the frequency pair. Okay? Purple. Yeah. And of course, now we have the receive group. So what's the receive group? It's like a talk group, except for it's on the receive side of your channel. So from your radio out, it's a talk group. From your radio in, it's a receive group. Now, why are these separate concepts? First thing you have to do is remember to go back to the fact that this is a commercial radio protocol. These concepts were put in place and put in the protocol because they're meant for commercial users, not for amateur radio use, right? The people that do the protocol didn't care about amateur radio. They didn't even conceive that the amateur radio community might even be remotely interested in this, right? So the receive group allows you to monitor multiple talk groups on a repeater slot, but you're limited to the talk group that's set on the channel as to what you can transmit on. In amateur radio terms, if you've got a repeater that has multiple talk groups on a time slot, this allows you to monitor all those talk groups to make sure the repeater slot is free before you transmit. Okay? So that's why those are separate concepts. This confuses a lot of people. Confused me at the front. Eventually you get your head around it, especially when you start getting into Brandmeister. Brandmeister. But and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But these are the things that you have to know up to here, because this will determine this. But these are the things you need to know in order to be able to program your radio successfully to talk to a repeater. Okay? Now the next inevitable question I get asked is, but Mike, where do you find this stuff? Where do you find the stuff about your analog repeaters? Yes, but as soon as you put it into print, it's out of date. Websites. Anybody that has a public repeater typically will have a website where they publish this information about their repeaters. Okay? RMHAM.org for ours, of course. Right? And if not, we give out demerits. Questions on these concepts, because these concepts are fundamental to what we're going to be doing today. Anybody? Euler. Okay, cool. Now, what do you need? Yes, that was actually me on an AOL support call when I was younger. Kid you not. Yeah. All right, what do you need? Well, first of all, you need a radio. Oddly enough, you cannot get on a DMR repeater with an analog radio, no matter how hard you try. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Fusion, P25, DMR, they're all separate things. You have to make sure your radio supports DMR for you to be able to get out on it. Yes? Okay, so that's an excellent question. So, and I put it up there because inevitably somebody asked me that question, and if I don't put it up there, and if I do put it up there, somebody asked me the question anyway. So there are different tiers of radio inside the DMR radio specification. A tier 1 radio will use one talk group for voice and another one repeater slot for voice and the other repeater slot for digital data. Text messaging, data transfer, networking, that kind of a thing. Tier 2 it does voice on both time slots. Okay? There's a whole bunch of issues with things like data transfer in amateur radio land because of the identification requirement. How do you put your call sign into a packet? It's troublesome. We haven't figured that out yet. So for now, especially on our RMHAM networks, we stick with voice on both talk groups. There's ways to get around it on text for texting because you can put your call sign in the text, but we recommend using Brandmeister repeaters or hotspots to do your texting. We ask that you do not use texting on our repeater network because it ties it up for voice. Okay? So, it can do that. So, yeah. What happens is with a lot of the Chinese radios when they implement this, they'll say it's tier 2 compatible, but what they're actually doing is transmitting their signal on both time slots simultaneously. It causes interference. We have identified some of these radios that are the worst offenders. We put those on our website. If you bought one of those, we're terribly sorry. Use it with a hotspot or something, but do not use it on our repeaters because it will tie up the network. Okay? So you need a radio. Obviously, you're going to need a programming cable. Some radios don't even come with a front keypad, so front panel programming isn't an option. You have to program it with the software and the cable. Okay? And if you want to keep yourself stress-free, you definitely want to do this with the software and the cable. You need the software. Oddly enough, there's not a whole lot of compatibility between the various different radio manufacturers on Coblock software. And as you'll see, not even between radios in the same manufacturer. Welcome to the Chinese radio world. Okay? You need a Windows computer or a Windows VM on a non-Windows computer or some kind of Windows emulation, because I have yet to find a CPS that runs natively on an operating system other than Windows. All right, next thing you're going to need. This is another new concept, a radio ID. RT Systems, okay. RT Systems software, yeah. Thankfully, the upside of the Chinese radios, that most of the Chinese radio companies that I've run across provide the CPS for free. So that's good. Radio ID. So since this is a digital system, digital systems are really, really fond of having IDs for anything that's on their network. Okay? So in a given network, repeater network in this case, each of the radios must have a unique identifier. Okay? Don't panic. There's a way to get one of these for free. You go to radioid.net. Or I like to call it radioid. Radioid.net. You create an account. This is in the old days, in the Wild West days, you didn't have to do this. Now they realize that, oh, we may be giving out radio IDs to people that don't even have a license. Yikes. So now you have to create an account, and you'll have to upload a PDF copy of your license, which you can get from the FCC website, to prove that this is actually you. Now, you do that, you request a radio ID, and they turn around and give you a radio ID. Okay? So the radio ID then will go into your radio, and you can use that radio ID for pretty much any network you can get access to, the RMHAM network, Brandmeister, DMR Mark. You'll just need the one ID. All right. Now, the next thing, of course, as we just talked about, you need the information about the repeater. Okay? So you need the frequency pair, color code, talk groups you want to talk on, and which repeater slot or time slot those talk groups are on. Okay? This is your list. Questions? So the talk group will determine the receive group. So the question was, what about the receive group? And the answer was that the talk groups will determine your receive groups. Other questions? All right, let's get into the workflow. Yes? You put it in your radio and you go out and broadcast and see if it works. Because somebody will talk back to you, hopefully. No. No. It's a red mic. All right. So John, I have yellow mic. So John is asking, how do you know if it works? Generally, you don't until you get out on the repeater and test, and somebody talks back to you. That's been my experience. Do you?
There's a talk permit tone on the radio. When you push to talk on a DMR channel and you get that bleep, that's a really good indication that the repeater said, yes, I'm here, we're working. But that doesn't tell you that the talk group is correct.
Right. Now, that tone does not actually exist on all radios. The cheaper the radio, the more chance that tone doesn't actually exist.
By a Motorola.
Yeah, well, we can talk about radio religion later, but yes. Yeah. So if you're expecting a talk tone and your radio doesn't support it, you're going to be sadly disappointed. So that's not, unfortunately, not a broad, in the Chinese realm, to be fair.
You can get better, but you can't pay more.
That's correct. That is correct. Okay, so let's talk about the workflow. All right? There is an order to this, oddly enough, that's going to make your life easier. Okay? First thing you want to do, always, is find in your CPS where you put in your radio ID before you forget. And we will know, because our sample code plugs have a preset radio ID in it. And we can tell when you transmit, everybody can see what your radio ID is because that shows up on everybody's radio. And we'll know if you forgot to change your radio ID. They will razz you. And the first time, politely. All right? Now, should come as no surprise as kind of my tone coming up to this point is that this particular location inside your CPS will change depending on what CPS you're using. And sometimes it's harder to find than others. Okay? This is the Connect System Cs700 800 software. This is in the general settings under Basic. It's one of the first screens you come to. So in that particular software, it's easy to find. Yes? You do not need two different radio IDs if you have two different radios. You do not want to transmit on both radios at the same time or have them on at the same time, but you don't need them. They can share an ID as long as only one is on at a time. They won't talk to each other. Now, this is best practice. Yeah, so this is best practice, right? So I have like a radio in my car that's a mobile, and then I have a handheld. They can have the same radio ID. So when I'm in the car, turn the mobile on, fine, turn it off, turn the handheld on, go off. It's not a problem, right? If you're doing radio testing like the club does, we'll have a set of IDs because we can run into that point where if we're trying to test over the network, and the radios have the same ID, it will not key up the other radio no matter how hard we try.
It will. Your mileage may vary, but if you're trying to do something that you absolutely need to communicate on through the network, get a different ID
Yeah, have a
because
different ID.
it will produce unexpected results.
Your first ID from radio ID, and that is very easy to get. The second one, they're going to start asking questions. So be ready for that. The first thing you want to do is put your radio ID into your code plug so you don't forget. Okay? Now, next thing. So this is a review, right? I'm going to hammer this home, right? Because this is over and over again. These are things you need to know. Now, the order of chow, when you start actually doing data entry, and trust me, what you're about to do is data entry. I know because I've forgotten how many times that I've actually built these code plugs from scratch because there wasn't a conversion program. So I'll sit down with some cold pizza and a beer, turn on some music, and spend an hour doing manual data entry. That's what it is, right? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to put in your talk groups. You're then going to build your receive groups off of your talk groups. You can then create your channels. Because in most software, when you go into your channel and you go to specify a talk group and a receive group, those are going to be a pull-down menu that are populated from the talk groups and the receive groups that you put in before. So this way you don't get hung up on, I'm trying to create a channel, but it won't let me put a talk group in. Well, did you put your talk groups into your contacts list? Yes? What do you mean? Okay, let's start over, right? You put in your talk groups first. Then you build your receive groups and talk your talk groups, and then you have those lists populated for your channel when you go to create your channel. It'll save you so much time if you do that in this order. Once you have your channels created, the final step is to add your channels to a zone. Right? Because your radio is going to ask you, when you key it up, or when you turn it on, which zone do you want to activate? And then when it brings up that zones, when you go to scroll through your channels, it's going to scroll through the channels in the zone that you selected. This is how the radio knows which channels you want to start talking on. Okay? If you have a DMR radio with a channel knob, right? How does it know which channels are on the knob? It's the channels that are in the zone that you have active. You can have multiple zones, right? And channels can be in more than one zone, but only one zone can be active at a time. Okay? Questions there? Oh, no questions. Good. Like I said, this is commercial radio concepts. Commercial radios have worked like this for a long time. It's just now we're doing this on DMR protocols, and now we're being forced to use this because, of course, we're not going to change the DMR protocol for us. Not going to happen. All right. Here are some example channels with all the information you need. Okay? This is how hopefully the information will be provided to you. Okay? So what do we got? We've got a channel name, and you can, in the channel name you can finagle with. What we tend to do, and what I tend to do, is name our channels by the repeater location and then the talk group that we're going to be talking on. Right?
Radio with this information because Lee Hill does not anymore
Again,
carry
these are examples.
Brandmeister.
This is not what we're going to be doing today. We have our color codes. We have the time slot that that particular talk group is on. We have the frequency pair, and we have the talk group. Okay. Now the talk group here it doesn't have the number. Right? And here in this case, Rocky Mountain is actually number 700. You may have to go and say, okay, great, this Rocky Mountain talk group, what is this? You may have to go and find the number on the website. But this is typically what you'll see, hopefully, on a website. If they're missing information, your information is on your website. Right? But this is kind of what you're looking at. Now, the other thing that you can look at here is you can actually tell a few things about the repeater by looking at this information. Typical for RMHAM repeaters in Colorado, few exceptions, one talk group per time slot. To keep it simple. On this old DMR mark repeater that no longer exists, you can tell that time slot 1 has 3 different talk groups. Time slot 2 has 2 different talk groups. But you'll also notice that on a per repeater basis, The frequency pair stays the same. The talk group stays the same. This is good because if your CPS is up to scratch, this reality is going to save you time because we can use a fancy little thing called copy and paste, which apparently some programmers in the CPS world didn't realize has been in the Windows world for quite a long time. It's like they discovered it new. The CPS for this radio, the cheapest radio that I can get, doesn't support copy and paste. You get what you pay for. Okay? So, first thing we're going to do in our CPS is we're going to put in our talk groups. Now, you would think that in the CPS that this would be in a place called the talk group list. Oh, no. It's in a contact list. The talk group works as a further access control, as we mentioned before. You must know which talk groups you want to be on. Talk groups are assigned to a repeater slot in the radio. More than one talk group could be assigned to a single repeater slot, but only one could be transmitting at a given time. Okay? So this is what it, let's see. This can get a little confusing for some folks. There are 3 different types of things you can put in your contact list. Talk groups is just one of them. Sometimes the talk groups are called public calls or group calls because certain people can't leave that alone. They have to call it something fancy or something else. Private calls are also considered radio IDs. And then you have this thing called all call. I'm going to start with all call first. All call basically means if a radio receives a signal with the right frequency pair, right repeater slot, and then the talk group says all call, it's going to open the radio regardless of the speaker regardless of what it was set as in the receive group. Kind of an emergency, everybody listen kind of thing. Now, in the DMR spec, there is this concept of a private call. Okay? You can send out a private call to the repeater and say, hey, this is a private call. It'll get transmitted out. Your radio receives that and it says, oh, this is a private call. If that private call ID matches the radio ID in the radio, it'll open the speaker and listen. If it doesn't, the radio ignores it. As you can imagine, this is frowned upon in the amateur radio world most of the time. Because what you're doing is that you're tying up an entire repeater slot amongst multiple radios for point-to-point communication. Okay? This is not kosher. And the RMHAM, our website specifically states, no private calls on our network, please. Don't do it. Because you're going to be tying up the network for a private call. What we're going to be talking about mostly today is the talk groups, because those are the most commonly used in the amateur radio world. That's what the new hotness is. When this started getting popular, you would find repeaters in California. California was notorious for this, where you would have a repeater with 2 time slots, and there'd be like 30 talk groups on a repeater slot. Because everybody wanted their own talk group, because it was fashionable to have your own talk group, right? And no one could communicate because they were tripping over each other. Go figure. Okay? Now, if you have a display, and by that, not all DMR radios have a display, right? The talk group, or the radio ID that's transmitting will show up on your display. If you put that talk group or that radio ID in your radio as a private call, and give it a name or give it a tag, the tag will show up instead. So instead of seeing 310811, you'll see K0NGA Mike. But it has to be in your radio. Okay? The only thing that gets transmitted over the network is the radio ID. Okay? This is what the contact list looks like inside your software. Okay? This example is again, the Connect System software. Most softwares will look similar. Not exact, but similar. Basically going to have a contact name or a tag. It's going to have the contact type, right? The call type, group call, private call, all call. And it's going to have a place to put in the number. All right? For example, Rocky Mountain is 700. I think north is 719. North is 721, south is 719 on the RMHAM network. That's not the what? Good. That's like Makes perfect sense. On Brandmeister, there are more talk groups than you could ever memorize. I mean, there's just like 60 billion talk groups, right? But in order to use it, in order to assign it to a channel, it has to be in the list first. This is why you do it first, okay? The talk group is the foundation of this, and populating this makes things easier along the way. So you just add one, you put in the information, call it done. And you put in all the talk groups that you think that you're going to be able to assign to a channel. So if you're doing Brandmeister, choose the talk groups that you want to talk on, because if you try to put them all in there, you're going to be there all day. If you try to import it, good luck with that, because your software might not be able to handle it, and if it can handle it, it's going to get sluggish. Okay, so really limit this to what you absolutely need. Questions on the talk groups? Okay, that's where we start. Once you have the talk groups in, you can start building your receive groups. Okay, the receive groups are on the receive side of your channel, and you can receive on more talk groups that you can talk on, because you're going to have one talk group per channel, but you can have multiple talk groups in your receive group to monitor for the talk groups that are on that repeater slot in that repeater. Okay? Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. They say this is overcomplicated. I say, I didn't write the protocol. Remember the doctrine. It is a commercial radio protocol. Accept it. It'll make your life easier. This is not something you can argue with. It is not something you can go to Etsy and say, well, this is really complicated. I think you should change it. They're going to say, who are you? Oh, you're not even a Motorola customer in the United States? Yeah, don't bother. Okay. So, now, here's the fun part. Some radios, like the Anytone radios, have this wonderful feature that whatever you set as the talk group on the channel will automatically be considered as part of the receive group on the channel without you having to put it in the receive group. Which is cool, but can be confusing. So what I'm going to teach you today is the right way to do it. How you do it after this, as long as it works, all the more power to you. I also like to cheat when we're talking about things like Brandmeister, because like I said, on Brandmeister, you can set up multiple talk groups and have lots of talk groups that you want to go on. And I don't want to have a receive group for every talk group for Brandmeister, so what do? I create one receive group called Brandmeister All, and I put all of my Brandmeister talk groups in Brandmeister All. And then when I create a Brandmeister talk group, I just assign Brandmeister All to it by default. Saves me tons of time, right? So I do recommend that if you're when we talk about Brandmeister, when you get onto Brandmeister, it's a great way to save time. That works really, really, really well with Brandmeister. Okay? So, receive groups are just even simpler than talk groups, because you create a receive group, give it a name, and then you just add the talk groups you want in that receive group into that receive group. Very straightforward. Nothing else to it. But you really want to do this first, because when you go to set the receive group for your channel, it's going to have you pick from the list of receive groups that you created. So if you didn't create it ahead of time, I got to go back and do the receive groups again. So do your talk groups and your receive groups first before you start building your channel. That's really the crux of the workflow. It's very simple. Questions? Okay.
Is it, or a comment and a question,
Okay.
is it possible to have a talk group, let's say on Brandmeister?
Okay.
Let's say, for example, Brandmeister selects talk group 700.
Okay.
And is it possible to use the same talk group on RMHAM, which we do, 700, that's our wide talk group number? Will that work in the world?
Define work.
Well, because when we're on the Brandmeister network, they're keeping that talk group contained on their island
Yep.
of repeaters. We're doing the same thing on ours.
Yep.
So it will work. You will route to the proper system.
Right.
But what is it going to tell you on your receive group and on your radio when that call comes in? You're not going to know whether you're on the one versus the other.
Right.
And
So
for that reason, we have tried to deconflict and make your life, when you're programming here, as Mike's teaching you how to do, a lot easier by having unique names.
Right.
But keep that in mind, if for some reason you've gone onto a network that's picked one of our numbers, you're going to be very confused.
So I have actually a specific example of this from the other direction. So talk groups are usually specific to the network that you're on. So we have the RMHAM network, we have our set of talk groups. You have the Brandmeister network, you have the Brandmeister set of talk groups, okay? Just because the talk group numbers are the same doesn't mean that they're going to automatically interoperate. In fact, they don't. We actually have a special system where you can transmit on a certain talk group on Brandmeister, and it'll come out north, south, or central on our systems, but the talk groups are different. So you have to know which talk groups to program if you're going through the Brandmeister system. You have to know what talk groups you're going to need to program if you're going through the RMHAM system, because they are separate. All right? That's why you go to the repeaters and get the information from the repeaters. Now, there is an organization in Wyoming that decided to make their Wyoming-wide talk group number the same as the Wyoming state talk group number in Brandmeister. I seriously question the wisdom of this, because depending on who you talk to, that's either really brilliant or really confusing. It's a commercial radio protocol. It was never designed for RMHAM use, or for amateur radio use. So, there are different networks. You have to use the right talk groups for the right networks. So this is what the receive group looks like. And now that we have our talk group list populated, we have a receive group list populated, we can now start building the channel. Now, this is what the channels look like inside the Connect System CS700 software. Oddly enough, not all the softwares look like this. And when we get into the practical side of the demonstration, you will see this. And now the thing is that this is a very kind of an oversimplification of the same screen that you might see in the Motorola software. They stole it, borrowed it without permission. But you can see the information on the screen here. So there's the list here. Here's all your digital channels. This is by the default digital channel 1. And you start at the top with the channel alias. That's just the name of the channel. Okay. You have a digital ID. We'll go over that in a second. Then you have the color code and the time slot right off the bat. Okay. Color code, which is a number, right, and the time slot. Then you have the receive side of the channel and the transmit side of the channel. The receive side of the channel, there's two things you care about here: the frequency and the receive group. Okay? Now, I know I don't need to say this to most of the people in this room, but because this has come up sometimes, I will say this. The receive frequency you set in the software is the transmit frequency from the repeater. The repeater is transmitting, the radio is receiving. Okay? Cool.
You look on our website, it will be very clear at the top of our lists. It says repeater input, repeater output. You have to reverse that for your radios.
Yeah, you have to think logically about that. Now, on the other side, transmit side, you have your transmit frequency, which is the repeater input or the receiver receive frequency. And in the Connect System software, it's referred to as the transmit contact. Again, that's called different things in other softwares. The reason why my hair is gray. So there you go. Frequency pair, color code, time slot, talk group which determines receive group. Every single programming software for DMR works off of this principle, works off of these components, because it's part of the DMR protocol spec. It'll be in there somewhere. The good news is that that doesn't change. The bad news is that they will try to be fancy and label it something else in the software, and it'll be confusing sometimes. But the core principle remains the same. It does not change. Okay? We already went through all this stuff. So this is what that's going to look like when you're done. This is one of our RMHAM channels. Repeater, the color code 7, slot 1 is going to be Rocky Mountain Talk Group. And in fact, on the transmit side, you can see there's the Rocky Mountain Talk Group selected with our transmit frequency, receive frequency coming from the transmit from the repeater, and our receive group, which we call Rocky Mountain as well, just to keep it simple. Your channel is now done. Add the next channel and continue. Okay? Willem. Okay, so that's a different topic, but we can go ahead since Willem brought this up. So he's asking, what is the transmit admit? TX admit. Called some other things on some other radios. We'll get to that in a minute. You can set this to transmit no matter what, or you can set it what the preferred setting for DMR. It's this thing called color code free. So if you have this set to color code free, when you press your transmit button, it's going to listen to see if any other radio signal with this frequency and this color code is transmitting. And if it hears something transmitting with the same frequency and color code, it's going to give you a beep. When you're going to look at your radio, it's going to say channel busy or something like that. Oh, somebody's transmitting. And if you're not hearing a transmission, that means one of two things. Either the radio is doing a silent digital ID, or somebody's transmitting on a talk group that you do not have in your receive group. Questions about that? Do you want to take that one?
Can you clarify what a silent digital ID is? There is actually nothing. There is no digital ID. What it does, the repeater every 10 minutes switches into analog mode and sends out the identification in Morse code for that repeater. In the time that it is transmitting that ID, it cannot process DMR information because it is in analog mode. Wait for it. If you can once get back into it in about 5 seconds, it was IDing.
Yeah. So there's that. That trips up a lot of people. It's like, I didn't hear anything. I have all the talk groups in, and I can't transmit. Why? It's like, try again. Oh, it works now. Yeah, it's just IDing. Move along. That's what a finished channel will look like. So we do recommend transmit admit to color code free for all DMR channels. It's the default that we set in all of our sample code plugs. Okay? All right, now I've got my channel. I go to the next channel, program those channels. I got my channel set in. Now what do? I just put it up into my radio and it works, right? No, it doesn't. You have to create your zones. What is a zone? Anybody want to take a guess at a very high level what a zone is? Huh? It's just a group of channels. It's just a list of channels, right? So basic concepts, channels are assigned to zones. It's a list. Okay? Only one zone can be active or in use at a time on a given radio. Okay? On HTs and some mobiles, this corresponds with the channel selection guide. Sometimes the channel selection is buttons, right? Radios can have numerous zones, thousands of zones, right? Knock yourself out, and it will. Channels can be members of more than one zone, right? If the CPS is worth anything. I'm looking at you, Connect Systems CS580. And the one thing I left up here, because we're not talking analog today, is that you can have a mix of digital and analog channels in the same zone. You can. It's perfectly legal and technically done. All right. Wow, almost exactly an hour. Cool. Questions before we dig into the dig-in-ness? Cameraman, I'm sitting down. All right, let's have some fun. Okay. That was last week. There's going to be a microchip quiz at the end of this. Question. What do you mean, how does this play out? Research. You don't have to get it all done in advance. It's great if you can, right? But you have to know what repeaters are out there and what their information is. Create your channels, create a West Coast zone, put them all in a West Coast zone, right, ahead of time. And then when you get out there, choose your West Coast zone and go nuts. Same process, different repeaters. Yeah. All right, can you guys see this? No, you can't. Why can't they see this? Because Windows. I blame Windows, and I'm going to come in and know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, for some reason it set it back to extend instead of duplicate. It did that on its own. I did not do that program. No, that was PowerPoint that did that. And now you can see it. Is anybody in the audience that can't see the screen? That was a trick question. All right. This is the CPS that corresponds with this little crappy, low-cost radio here. Okay? So you're looking at this and going, where the heck do I start? Okay. So if you're starting all this on scratch and you don't have somebody looking over your shoulders or you don't have me on the phone or something like that, you can start clicking on some of this stuff and figuring out, okay, here's our first thing. We go to general settings. Look what we have here. Radio ID. Right off the bat. Fantastic. What's the first thing you do in your co-plug? Put that in there. Now, I recommend being fastidious about this and saving often. I'm going to call this workshop. As do many people. Yes? Yes? Oh, yeah. So did you. Okay. Did you have a question, Willem? No. That's a concept for certain other radios which I won't mention. Now, there are some radios that will force you to do that, but this one does not, obviously. I just open it up and we're on a new co-plug.
But isn't it good practice that you read the radio and at least save it? You don't have to.
For me, no. But if you want to say it's like I want to be able to get my radio back to defaults, you can go up here when you got your cable plugged in and read your radio and then save that off, just so you have that in your back pocket in case things go really wrong. Try to say that 3 times fast, and you end up dropping your radio in the toilet or whatnot, and you need to send it off for repair. But yeah. We have the Statler and Waldorf of Motorola over here. So there's your radio ID. Now, general concept, if you don't know what it does, don't change the setting. Okay? Just don't touch it. We have all these things like alert tones. We know what alert, we have buttons that you can change. All this kind of stuff. Let's get to where we can actually transmit something. So the first thing we need to add is what? Talk groups. Very good. Talk groups are in the talk group list? Contact list, right? So in here, there's nothing that says contact list. There is this thing, though, called digital contact. Oh, good. There's our contact list. How can we tell? Name, call type, call ID. Glorious. Okay. So we're going to call this one, just for an example, I'm going to say Rocky Mountain. It's a group call, not a private or all call, and that's 700. Something I want to kind of show you, if you choose all, and I'm just going to call this all call. This is fun. If you set this to all call, watch what happens to the call ID. All call, please. Fantastic software. You put that in for you because it's a known number. Does anybody recognize that number? It's 8 digit, right? How many bits is that? 2 to the factor of something minus 1, right? Because computers start counting at 0. So that's basically an 8 or 16-bit number, the digital equivalent of that number. Okay? Is all call. Okay? So, we're just gonna run through this real quick, then I want to show you some other software. All right, so that's your talk group. Now the receive group is gonna be somewhere. Here they call it Digital RX Group List. Again, they've tried to make it sound fancy. Here's our first group, receive group. I'm going to call this Rocky Mountain. Oh no. First thing about cheap software, they will limit the number of digits. So you have to get silly with it. That's how I do it. And since there's only one talk group there, except for all call, it automatically puts it in there for you. But now that talk group is done. So we've got our Rocky Mountain receive group and our Rocky Mountain talk group. Have I lost anybody yet? Good. So we populated the two things we need to populate for a Rocky Mountain channel. All right. Where the heck is our channel list? Where did it go? Oh, look, something called channel okay, there it is, channel information. Again, it may not just say channels. You have to be smart, and you have to try to outthink the developer who tried to make this too fancy for you. This will be a running theme. Stay tuned. All right. As I mentioned before, the DMR is digital, so we're going to do a digital channel. It automatically specs 12.5 kilohertz. We're going to call this fake Rocky Mountain. Ran out of space again. Okay. We're going to do something. We're just going to call this 4448. Again, this is just fake. 443. Power level. Everybody always sets it to the lowest power and then goes out and tests and then only raises power if they need to, right? No, of course you don't. All right. Scan list is another topic. Now, where the other one it said transmit admit, guess what it calls it here? Access policy. Look at that. Again, running theme. Huh?
That admit criteria.
Admit criteria. All right. Now, just so happens, in case you guys are considering getting a Motorola or a Kenwood DMR radio, because you care about your radios and have deeper pockets than me, we are actually doing a Motorola Kenwood programming class next month. All right. Over here on the right side, this is where the stuff that we need to do. So, again, transmit contact, it knocked off the end of that. That's great. So here's our transmit contact, our time slot. We're going to put this on slot 1. Our color code, which we know needs to be 7 because 7 is Rocky Mountain's favorite color. That's a color code number joke, as I said before. Receive group. This one actually has a thing where you can actually set it to current talk group. That's what the default. So it's going to set the Rocky Mountain talk group as its only receive talk group, or you can select the actual receive group that you programmed.
So regarding color codes, if you see something different than 7, it means it's used multiple times in the state. So we try to make them discrete. So if you have a repeater that's a color code 8, it means it's used twice. If you have one that's a color code 9, it's used 3 times.
That means
so
the frequency pair is used somewhere else in the state,
just
trying to ensure that we don't get crossed off.
there are different color codes than 7. It just indicates that it's been used multiple times.
All right. That channel is now done. Okay? What's the last thing we need to do? I'm going to go ahead and say it, but we do now need to create a zone in the zone. You can call your zones whatever you want. Call them Fred, George, whatever you want to call it. In the samples, we do it by geography, north, south, central, four corners, New Mexico, whatever. As long as they make sense to you, knock yourself out. And then this one has this fake Rocky Mountain channel already in it because, again, it's the only one. So that zone is now done. This code plug, after we save it, because you always save it first, is now ready to upload to your computer and get onto that fake channel. Okay? That's it. Everything else is just a repeat. Let's look at a different piece of software. Let's look at the glorious Anytone. You might notice a few differences right off the bat. This thing looks like it was programmed by a Cisco engineer. Anybody ever actually sat in on a Cisco technical pre-sales presentation? Encyclopedia on a slide. They'll put up a spec sheet on the slide and turn around and do the entire presentation like this. It's like you could just give them a handout and it would accomplish the same thing. Anyway. Okay. Where do we begin? Let's go to our common setting, the first thing on the list. Let's double click. Nope, that's just a thing. So it starts out, oh look, we're on the channel list. Starts out there. Where the heck is our radio ID? We need to put in our radio ID, right? Let's look under digital. Oh look, oh crap, what? Radio ID list? What's that about? Oh dear Lord. So this again, what's the old saying that the road to hell is paved with flexibility? No, flexibility, and used door to door and door to door salesman. That's a different thing. For some reason, somebody at Anytone thought it would be a really good idea to let somebody put multiple radio IDs into a radio, because apparently this was a common thing. No, it wasn't a common thing. This is so much bright idea that there was like, you know, they needed another feature to put on the checkbox to make the box look cool, right? This has very, very little practical application in the real world. I don't even use this. And I have 3 radio IDs. I don't use this. It's silly. Okay? But you do have to put your radio ID in the radio, right? That's my radio ID. I just put that in there for a label and call it done. Okay? Your radio ID is now on the radio. This is not the last time you will see this. This will come back to haunt us very, very soon. All right, we've got our radio ID in. What's the first thing we do? What's the next thing we do? No, we save. Okay. File save, okay, save file, okay, very good. Now, here's something you need to know if you're using an 878 or a 578. This is something they put in the code plug later that no one told me about, that I skipped over, that I didn't read, because I don't really read. Who reads the release notes? Anybody, really? This doesn't apply to 868 because it's a lower end radio. You'll notice there's this thing up in the upper hand corner called the model menu list. Note what this says. Commercial European mode. What in the heck is that? They built one radio instead of doing separate normalization for each radio depending on which market they wanted to sell in. They decided to save money, make one radio, and then leave it up to you to make sure you set it for the frequency range that you need it to work at, instead of creating a different model. Now there is, thankfully, a very, very simple selection here that's easy to figure out. Amateur US mode 00007. That wasn't an RMHAM thing. That's a total coincidence, I promise. You click OK. It's going to clear out your frequency list. So for your Anytone users, do this before you start on your data entry, or you're going to have a bad day. Because it will clear out anything in your channel list. And all your hard work just went poof.
We have a question on the chat.
Question on the chat.
What is the common practice for the name that you enter associated with the radio ID?
Your call sign and a name. Keep it simple. Don't make it complicated. Please. All right. Now we've got our mode set. We've saved the code plug again because obviously we want to do that. I'm going to overwrite. Very good. All right. So anytone, we've set our model. Let's double check and make sure our radio ID is still there. Look at that. It's not. Have I told you how much I love this software? You do. Yes. All right, we've set our mode. We've set our radio ID again. Next thing. Talk groups. All right. We have this contact talk group area. We also have this digital contact list down here. What's that about? Now, if you've got experience with the radio, let's see if the other folks can figure this out. Uh-huh. Are you sure? Good, because that's correct. All right, so this is a feature, one of the first features that I came across that really turned me on to the Anytone radios from an amateur radio perspective. Okay, remember when I said that that if you put in your contact for your radio ID as a private call with a tag, that when it showed up on your screen, it would show up as the tag instead of the radio ID? This is good until you realize that the entire list from radioid.net is in the hundreds of thousands. Okay? Most radios will not hold that many talk groups. Not only that, but when you go into your channel and you pull that pull-down list to choose a talk group, that entire list is going to be populated with that list. Anytone solves this by separating them into two lists. So whatever you put here in this contact talk group list in the Anytone is meant for your talk groups that you're going to set for channels. Anything for radio IDs that you want on your contact list to show up on your screen should be done down here in the digital contact list. They separate them out so you can actually upload them and maintain them separately. Hallelujah. Now here's the cool thing. PowerWorks, the company, sells these Anytone radios, the 878s, 578s, or whatnot. They will actually, on a daily basis, they publish a little CVS file with the entire list from Radio ID that you can import here. And they update it on a daily basis. So you don't have to type this stuff in manually. If you need to. It's crazy because the list is long, so I wouldn't recommend that unless you have lots of time and probably some alcohol. You can filter by state and those kind of things, correct. But now here's the thing also. Here's my recommendation if you're going to do this. Do not do this first. Okay? Program everything else into your code plug and save it. Right? Then import the contact list and then push it into your radio and then don't save the code plug. Because if you save the code plug with all of those contacts in there, every time you open the code plug, it's going to have to load that list, and you'll be waiting for 30, 40 seconds for that code plug to open before you can do anything with it if all those are in there. Okay? You can just import it and push it to your radio every time you want to update the list, and it makes it a lot easier to handle if you don't save it with those in there. Okay?
Let me make another suggestion for the people that are lazy. Don't update your contacts. I don't even update mine at
I'm a
all.
contact list junkie. I like to see that on my screen. If you don't care about seeing it on your screen, just skip it. It's up to you. Okay? All right, so we need to get this in here. So it has a default one, so we're just going to do this one. We'll call this one, again, Rocky Mountain. Wow, let me put the whole thing in there. Look at that. Okay. Cool, didn't cut it off. So again, this is where you put in your talk groups. We pretend now that we have our talk groups in. What's the next thing we do? And what's the next thing we do in the co-plug? After we save, then what? Receive groups? Oh, look, receive group call list. Department of Redundancy Department. All right. Great, so it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? Now you double click on this. You have to double click on it, and then that brings up the interface. Rocky Mountain. Well, let me put the whole thing in. Cool. And this one doesn't auto-populate, so we actually have to select it and move it over. Click OK, and then there's our receive group. Groovy? All right. Now we can actually start doing our channels. It does have a couple of default channels in here, for whatever reason. We're going to delete these. Blink. Blink. All right. To edit the channel, double-click on one of those squares, and this brings this up. Now, this particular interface is a perfect example of what I mean when I say you should never let an engineer create an interface. You should have somebody with some actual interface design experience. Because this is just like, all right, let's go down the list. Again, this is a fake channel, so we're going to call this fake Rocky Mountain. Nope, doesn't fit. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Okay, so there's our fake frequencies. There's actually a place in here for you to correct the frequency. Should you put anything in there? No, why? Because you don't know what it does. All right. All these over here, we'll leave those alone. Let's go down and see what we have next. Channel type, digital. Transmit power, high, of course. Thank you, Tim Taylor. All right. Here we are again. Transmit permit. What this is called. Somebody at Anytone needs to be having a talk to. Different color code, same color code, Bueller. What the heck does that mean? Now, if you haven't noticed already, there is this help down at the bottom. The different color code means the radio can transmit if it receives signal has matched the frequency slot but mismatched the color code. So why is that even in there? It doesn't match the frequency. Why do you care? Same color code is what you want to set there. Okay? The scan list we don't talk about today. Here's the next thing that they threw in besides the radio mode for the 878 and the 578 that you need to be aware of in the code plug. It is this thing called Dmr Mode. If you are on a simplex channel, and that means that your transmit and receive frequencies are the same, you want to set to simplex. If you're on a repeater, you want to set that to repeater. For some reason, in their infinite wisdom, they also added this double slot selection, which is where you transmit on both slots at the same time, which we've already covered is actually interference. Why would they put that in there? I don't know. But for repeaters that have different frequencies for transmit and receive, you want this on repeater. Or it won't work, as we discovered. I don't know why they just between different. It automatically set that when you have different frequencies. I don't know. The next thing is even more frustrating than that because this is something that threw me off because it doesn't make any sense, and then threw everybody else off because it's completely different from every other software, including the Motorola. The contact. Notice that the contact is a square, not a list. Why? because they thought it would be cool. How in the heck do you change this to something else? You actually have to click the button, and then it gives you a grid of buttons for every talk group that you have in the list that you set. And then you double click the square that you want, and it sets it. This is the only CPS I've run across in my experience in the Chinese radio realm that does it that way. Okay? So if you have an anytone radio, that's how you set the transmit contact or the transmit talk group. That's how you set it. Oh, look, here's our radio ID friend again. So if you have multiple radio IDs in the radio list, which you don't, you can actually set this to when you select this channel, this is the radio ID it'll transmit with. Color code 7. There's our repeater slot. We leave the 1 because it's on 1. Here's our receive group list, Rocky Mountain. That channel is essentially done. We did the transmit permit already. There's that channel. Save. Okay. And then finally, we can create our zone. In the zone. Okay, did the whole thing, good. Add that to the zone. There's a zone. Okay, our zone now has our channels. We save it. That basic code plug is ready to go. So this radio is dual band, dual channel. You have a channel A and a channel B, and you can actually set a different zone on each of the different channels. Or you can set a different talk group, a different channel on each of the different channels. So this will tell it when you select this zone, which should be the default channel for A and which should be the default channel for B. One of the things about the Anytones that made them really popular, they were the first one to come out with a truly viable dual band VHF, UHF, DMR radio. You wouldn't see that in the commercial world because you would buy either a UHF or a VHF repeater for your business. You would just buy the radios to match. There was no need for there to be dual band. That was a totally amateur radio thing, and for the longest time, there were no dual band radios. When are they going to come out with it? They who? Motorola? Motorola isn't interested in amateur radio customers. They're all commercial customers. And this is the way the commercial does. That's the way they do the radios. There were a few attempts, but Anytone was the first one to come up with one that was truly viable. Question? Does RMHAM do anything with VHF DMR? Yes, we have some VHF DMR repeaters. They're in a talk group called Eastern, and those are that's where are those repeaters located? Ish, geographically.
So are we on? Okay. We have a VHF repeater on a Magre and on Squaw, and a new repeater that's being brought up, but it's having some receiver problems up on Fort Collins on Buckhorn. Those three repeaters are on the 700 Rocky Mountain wide talk group on one time slot, and this will be on the website. And I'm sorry, Mike, I'm going to give numbers. He hates when I use numbers, and I use numbers, he uses words.
Yep.
But it's also, there's a, what we call an Eastern talk group, which is talk group number 705. And that was because these VHF repeaters are fairly high up on the mountains. You know, Magre's over 13,000 feet, Squaw's 11,000. I forget what Buckhorn is, probably 10,000. And they cover the eastern part of the state on VHF, so we named it Eastern. There is also a VHF on Lookout Mountain, and that one, I believe, is on the Denver 720, or excuse me, the Central 720, and I'm trying to remember what the second talk group is, but it'll be on the website. Those are our VHF offerings. They're really not heavily used. They're kind of experimental. Our main presence is on UHF. The other thing we were doing with VHF is it's a place for us to experiment with data. Mr. Conga here, Mike, is not going over any of our data work today because we haven't figured out what we want to do. But as he pointed out, DMR can do voice and data. Our repeater network is the best data network that you've never used. And we don't quite know how to make it do what we want it to do. He alluded to the call signs and other pieces. Well, we do have the capability to carry APRS data. We just don't know how to do it legally, and we don't know how to bring the data out of our network and put it into the others. The same thing with this could be an alternate to packet or a backup to packet that ARES groups use because we have full duplex repeaters and backbones. We don't know how to do it. So that's what VHF is for, and if you have a VHF radio, help us experiment with these and figure out how to do it.
Yep.
Like Home Depot says, let's do this. We don't know how to do this.
I actually have some folks that get in on the DMR net first Saturday of the month, every month on the Rocky Mountain Talk Group, 7 o'clock p.m. net control. That actually will come in during that net on the VHF repeaters just to get experience and to test them, which is really cool.
Just a final comment about we put a new repeater on Fort Collins on Buckhorn Mountain, and it's got a very nice view of southern Wyoming to our north over towards Fort Collins, and it'll be a nice partner complement to Squirrel Mountain. Problem is there are, I believe, 5 50,000 watt FM broadcast stations up there between 88 and 108 megahertz, and the site is so RF hot that our radiation monitors that we now carry when we're at these sites, if we go more than about 30 feet up the tower, they peg. They're at 150% of reasonable human exposure. As we're working on the ground, we'll go through little areas of 20 to 30 to 40% on the ground. So we wear these when we're up there to make sure we stay out of the hot zone. The problem is our repeater receivers are getting hammered by this for the same reason. And so the Fort Collins VHF is deafer than deaf. And we're working on it. We're going to experiment probably with DMR receiver voting to see. So if you're using VHF in Fort Collins, it's not going to work so well yet, but we're working on it.
Yep. Cool. All right. Now, I'm bringing up this software for a specific reason. This is the Cs700 software. Cs700 was one of the first really, really popular, affordable Chinese radios on the market. I bring this up because this CPS for this software is eerily similar to another very popular radio, the TYT or the Titera MD380/390. A really, really interesting reason for that. Anybody want to guess why? The innards of it were essentially the same radio. Yeah, exactly. So this is what in the old days what the software used to look like. And again, these radios are still viable. They don't sell them anymore, but you can get them used. We have people that still use these. I have mine in a box somewhere. Basic information. Nope, nothing in there. General setting. Now the radio ID is up here. I give my radio a name. There's the radio ID. The radio ID is in there. We're going to save this. Workshop it. Oh no! It uses the same extension as another software, but they're completely incompatible. How odd. That was satire, folks. You will see that a lot. Say, well, they have the same extension. Yes, but the binary structure is completely different. They're not compatible. Sorry. But they have the same extension. Let's go over this again. I didn't write it. I didn't make the rules. I just have to try to communicate it with other people. So that's where the radio ID goes in. Digital contact, again. Here's our digital contact list. Running theme. Same things, just sometimes called differently, right? Sometimes I get to this and I can't spell. It's great, and I'll come back and say, why did I put that? Oh, okay. I was getting tired by then. There is our talk group. Digital RX group call. Very good. So that one's done. Channel list is at the bottom here. So here's our channel. Digital, and again, just everything sprawled everywhere. Fake channel. Okay. 438. 433. Let me show you some of one of the other wonderful things about this. So I'm up here. If I hit tab, where do you think it'll end up? Down at the bottom. Let me just do this for a while and try to see where if it makes any logical sense to you. And of course, they put the scan list first for some reason. Reference frequencies. Again, if you don't know what it is, don't touch it. Power is at high by default because of course. Oh look, admit criteria. Someone was trying to be Motorola. Someone was trying to be Motorola. Color code. There we go. Transmit contact. Finally, yay. Receive group. Yay. Color code 7 and repeater slot 1. Save that bad boy. Zone 1. Rocky Mountain's already in there. And save. That one's done. Yep. Is this in the same software? Which software are you in? What screen is that in? Channel information. I don't see that one in here. Am I missing it? This is the 878 software? Oh, MD380. Okay, so that there are going to be differences. The model is the same, but it's going to be different on the channel information. Let's see. I don't see it in the CS700. What are your options? We're going into MD380. He's got a selection called. What is the menu called or the selection called? The list. In call criteria. Try to figure out what it is. So follow admit criteria is what you want there. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Like I said, it's an adventure, right? Now the final one that I have here ready to show you is the one that I showed in the presentation. It's blank. Ah! Nothing shows up. What the heck? Oh, new. Oh, and then I have to know what frequency range I want. This is the only one that really corresponds to amateur radio. Amateur radio was like 420 to 450, right? Is the 70 meter band allocation for amateur radio? Okay, so 400 to 470 is the only one that's going to match that. Are you sure? No, I opened this up for my own health. Yes, I want it up there. Again, it's an adventure. Radio information. Wow, look at that. So that's a cool screen. Here's our settings. Ugh. Power on messages. Here, finally here, hidden here, the fourth one down is our radio ID. Whew, we found it. All right. I love this. Not digital, not DMR, conventional. Oh, look, there's everything. Thank goodness. All right, where is our contact list? Under DMR services. Contact. Whew. Again, this is going to change depending on the software that you have. It'll be in there somewhere because it has to be. Just have to find it. And as we've also discovered and talked about, sometimes they will completely change what you have to do when they update the firmware and put in new features that you wouldn't know unless you actually read the release notes, like some people don't. So there is our talk group. Thankfully, right underneath it is the receive group list. Yay, cool. But this one, they put the name at the bottom. Because why not? This is why people end up going back to Motorola. At least across the Motorola radios, they're consistent. All right. The talk group. Receive group is done. Let's go create our channel. Now, in case I'm not being clear on this, you don't have to create your talk groups and your receive groups individually. If you have a list, go ahead and put them all in there ahead of time, right? Here's our channel, digital channel. Here we go. Again, this is what exactly kind of what it looked like in the presentation. This is sort of what the Motorola ones look like. We're going to call our channel Fake Rocky Mountain. Oh, won't fit. Our color code is at the top instead of on the side. Our repeater slot is also at the top instead of the side. Our receive frequency, our transmit frequency, and then our receive group, our transmit contact, and down here we have our transmit admit to channel code free. That channel's done. Okay, save. And then zone is right up here, thank goodness. Again, in this software, the zone name is at the bottom. And our fake Rocky Mountain's already, I don't want that analog channel in there, take that out. Save, done. The same process over and over again, it's just where in the world did they put that in this code plug? Like a game. Find the contact list. All right? Questions? Did anybody bring a CPS today that's not one of these CPSs? That's not a Motorola or a Kenwood. Good. Essentially the same thing. Good. Yeah, one of the things that are really smart of is like, maybe we shouldn't create the CPS from scratch. Maybe we don't want to invent the wheel. Maybe we'll just use their code plug or let them reskin it or something. Yeah. Okay. All right, so can we take a break? So we're going to take a 10-minute break. During the break, come up and get one of these pieces of paper. These have 3 channels that we're going to program today. And as you may have guessed, those channels coordinate with the 2 hotspots I have up here on the table. We're going to have some fun. Come up and get one. 10-minute break. And we're back. So we had a comment in the RMHAM chat over the break about some inconsistency on the VHF repeaters. If you would please put that in the chat, and we'll take that offline, but it's not something we can actually handle at the moment in this particular class actively. Welcome back. Okay. Does everybody have their sheet? Does anybody not have their sheet? Okay. So here is how we're going to do this. This is how I want you to do this. You treat this sheet as if this is the information that you gleaned from the repeater website. Okay? I don't know if this sheet has been shared out on the Zoom call. Okay. So the handout on the website, grab that down. There are 3 channels. Now, can anyone tell me what's really odd about the hotspot 1 channel? Transmit and receive are the same. What does that tell you? Simplex. Excellent. Very good. So in the hotspot world, most, I would say, I'm going to put my neck out and say the most hotspots are going to be simplex. Okay? They have one channel. They have one talk. They only support one talk or one repeater slot. Sorry, one time slot, one repeater slot, and they only can really effectively operate on one channel. You can set a separate send and receive channel, but that's not duplex. So when you're transmitting to the radio, it doesn't transmit that back out on the other frequency. It doesn't transmit until you stop transmitting, so it's not truly duplex. So it really doesn't give you any benefit to do that on the simplex hotspot. There are hotspots and hotspot hats that are actually truly duplex. That will do duplexing. So when you're transmitting, when you're receiving, it's transmitting, and has 2 time slots. How do you know which is which? Well, you have to know what you're buying, right? So on the screen now, if we look at this radio, you'll notice, and I hope I got the frequencies right. Yes, I did. Down here in the radio ID of this particular hotspot, the transmit and receive are the same. And if you go further down, you notice that the time slot 1 is disabled. Because this hotspot only operates on time slot 2. And that matches what's on your sheet. If I go to my other hotspot, it's a little different. The transmit and receive frequencies are different. We have a time slot 1 and a time slot 2. Okay? It'll depend on whatever radio hardware that you buy for your hotspot or that's in the hotspot that you buy. Okay? This second one is more of a programming experience that you're going to have for a true repeater than the first one. But since I know a lot of you guys will have hotspots, you're probably going to end up with a simplex hotspot. We're putting the simplex in there in order to make that work. So you can get experience with that. Okay? So, let's program. We're going to start with a fresh code plug. Going to start with a fresh code plug. Okay. Let's look at our radio ID list. Okay. Very good. First thing, so we're going to do the anytone because it's far more the most complicated. Follow along in your old code plug. What's the first thing we do in an anytone code plug? No. Set the model. Good, it's set. Very good. Then we can do the radio ID. Okay. Save that, and now we're going to save. We're going to call this, what should we call this? Suggestions? That's oddly boring and appropriate. Okay. Now, we're going to do both zones up front. Okay? Or both zones, both channels up front with all the talk groups and whatnot. So we need to come down to our contact talk group here. The first one that we have is talk group 98. Now, I on purpose did not give you the talk group label for this. And I put that in, okay, so there's 98. The name of this is actually, we're going to call this BM test. This aligns with the channel name that's in the far left of your list there. This is the Brandmeister test channel. The test channel is specifically set aside by Brandmeister for testing, oddly enough. And there we go. And it is a group call. Now we're going to add in the second channel. What do you think 3108 is, based on the channel name? Colorado, Brandmeister, Colorado, BM Colorado, BM for Brandmeister. Talk group ID is going to be 3108. Okay. Everybody still with me? It's group call. Which software are you in over here? On the MD380? Do-do-do-do. So you're probably going to be looking for the digital contact list. Digital contacts. Okay? And then there's your list. Click. You can edit the first one. If you need to add a second one, should be an add button. Yep. Very good. So this is again the Anytone. Anybody not there yet except for these guys? Questions? Completely lost? Which Connect systems? Oh, the 800D, which looks more like the 700 than the 750 and the 800 on the CPS, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So you have the digital contact set up? You're there? Good? We get over here? So yours will look more like BM test 98. Actually, I have to click in it. Thank you, Connect Systems. And then BM Colorado and 3108. It looks something like that. Does the order that these go into your contact list matter? No, does not. If you're OCD, the fact that it won't be in alphabetical order may aggravate you. Please know that that is your own fault. Talk group number. Are you editing an existing coplug? New coplug? Okay, and then the second one should be 3108. That's a different channel. You only have to put it in the contact list once, and you can reuse it. Yeah, there we go. It's not a problem. You only need each talk group in the list once. This is why we're doing this. Other issues? Are we good? Okay, let's move on to the receive group. We're going to have some fun here. Now, in the Anytone, this is a list. On the other softwares, you'll see this. You'll pop up the receive group, and you have to add down here, and you have these back and forth buttons. Do whatever you need to do. Now, here's the proper way to do it, quote unquote, proper way to do it. Let's create BM Colorado, and we'll put the Colorado group in there. We'll do a second one called BM Test, and we'll put that one over there like that. This is the proper way to do it. Now, if you want to be like me and do the cheater way, and I do highly recommend it, BM all, and just throw them all in there. Call it done. Okay? On the other software, so here's this one. We'll call this one BM Test. We'll put test in there. You add another one, BM Colorado. Select it, add it over there, just moving it over from the list. Add a third one. Again, this is for demonstration purposes, BM all. And put them all in there, depending on which way you want to do it. Okay? Now, this is kind of confusing because this doesn't have a list like the talk group list there. So the only way you can kind of tell what's there is by looking here. And I've got my Rocky Mountain one there. I've got a test, Colorado, and all, because I ever had a Rocky Mountain one in there for excuse me. And of course, now that one's changed. So let's see what happened to that channel. We'll get that in there in a second. Okay. I'm going to delete that so we can, okay, so now it looks clean. Okay? So BM test, BM Colorado, BM all. Question?
Have a group list.
Wait, which software? 878, over here.
Yeah. I clicked on one.
Maximize your screen. Yes, it's the divider. GUI madness. Yes. Yep. It's okay.
What do I do? I just been.
Okay, so we need a Brandmeister test. So in that contact list, you can just type in BM space test. Get rid of the rest of it. Yep. No, space.
Oh.
Yep. And then this call ID is 98. Very good. Now go down to where you have Rocky Mountain.
Yeah.
We're going to change that to BM Colorado. And then the call ID is 3108. And then you can go down and put your cursor in contact 2. Oh yeah, okay, so, okay. Go ahead and click that. Put your cursor in contact 2. Click the delete button at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Now go change your BM Colorado to 3108.
Here.
Yep.
All right. And no there.
And just click it or tab out or tab it. Oh, nope. Or press enter, 3108, and then press enter. Okay. Then oh. Click back into like the contact name, just so that registers. Just click in the contact name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's done. That's exactly how it's supposed to look. You're just creating a list.
All right.
And then in your group list, yep, double click on group list 1 underneath that on the left. Yep. Because that's your first list.
All right.
BM test is already in there, so if you go ahead into the group list name at the top, just change that to BM test. And then that's done. So then hit add. There's our second one. We can call that BM Colorado. And of course, you got your cap locks reversed. It's all good, however you want to do it. And then now select BM Colorado on the left. Click the add button in the center to move that over to the member. So everything here is a member. This is your available list.
Okay.
So those are now done. You can see your list over here underneath the folder. So you're set. You're up to speed. Yep. So what? All of them. So I put both of the ones that I created in BM all. This is my cheater way of handling Brandmeister. This is the receive side. You can't, because you can only talk on one talk group. The concept doesn't apply on the transmit side. Cool? All right. Now,
Mike, we have a question on the chat.
question in the chat.
In the AT878 CPS, do you delete a group by just clearing out the fields and saving? Did not see a delete button.
In the groups, the receive groups, you can double click on the group that you want to delete. Yeah, and just clear the information out. I think also if you click there to where it's highlighted and hit the delete button, it also deletes it. Not intuitive. Welcome to the world of Anytone. All right. So if you want to create your BMall receive group, you just hit the add, name it BMall, and then put both channels into that receive group. I'm sorry? Is there under the receive group list? Just double click on either one of the existing receive groups that you have, and then click the add button on that screen. That's your talk groups.
Yeah.
So just double click there on one of those. Double click it. Not coming up. Oh, it's over here.
Yeah.
So now you can click add at the bottom. This is for adding channels. That's for adding groups. Name your group BMall. And then add both of your talk groups to that receive group. Yep. Now you're set. So again, the BMall receive group concept is a way of cheating on Brandmeister, because you don't, if you have, as some people do, 100 different Brandmeister talk groups, you don't want to have to go back and create 100 different Brandmeister receive groups. Put all the talk groups in the same receive group and just call it done. Okay? But in the way that DMR was originally conceived, the one receive group per talk group, as that happens, or one receive group per repeater slot, is the way that it was originally conceived. Brandmeister breaks a bunch of conventions in that particular regard, which is why it's okay to cheat on it. Okay? Everybody with me? All right. Time to create the channels. All right, now watch this. Here's our channels. I'm going to delete the existing analog channel. So just click in the box and click delete. Your software may vary. If you're in something like this and you have that first default channel, this fake channel here, it won't let you delete the last channel. So just edit the channel. Okay? All right. I'm going to switch over to this one first. So the first thing we want to do is set up our channel name. So we'll call this Hotspot 1 Test. Oh, yeah, it fit. Yay. We go over to our Anytone at the very top, Hotspot Test. So it's Hotspot 1 Test because we have 2 hotspots. Okay? Now, the cool thing, most of the time on a website, actually, let me back that up. If a website gives you a frequency and only gives you one frequency for a repeater, typically which frequency is that? A transmit frequency. That is the frequency that the repeater is going to transmit on. Okay? So our repeater transmit frequency for hotspot 1, of course, again, this one's the same, but we're going to have that conversation now, is 438.55. Now, if you'll notice, in this CPS, the first frequency asked for is the receive frequency. That's the radio receive frequency. So the first frequency here is the transmit and the receive. So that was smart. Now, the other side of that coin is that this is a simplex, so we have to put the same frequency in both boxes. This will change on our next repeater, or our next channel. Okay? So those are in. The frequencies are in. All right? The next thing that we have on our, we're going to go down the list, and then we'll check over the channel before we move on. Color code 1. Color code on this CPS is on the right side. Go up, color code 1. In the Anytone, it's over here as well, color code 1. Okay? Now, this hotspot only has one time slot. That's time slot 2. So we need to change this to time slot 2. Notice it's just called slot. So they didn't have to actually type in repeater or time. It's just a slot. Over here, repeater slots here, repeater slot 2. Okay? The last thing is our talk group. Talk group 8. Again, here's our button. Note the grid. Either Colorado or test. This one we're doing test. Right? And then we know we need to do our receive group. Here we have a choice. We can either do it the proper way and do Bradmeister test, or we can do it the cheater way and just do Bradmeister all. Makes no difference. This is why I only do Bradmeister all. I'll just do it, and then when I add Bradmeister talk groups, I just add everything into Bradmeister all as I create them. Right? Let's double check a few things. Transmit permit, color code free, same color code here. Admit color code here. Very good. Now, this next particular thing is particular to simplex hotspots. What should we choose for DMR mode? No, repeater. Because of the way that PyStar works, in the back end, it's actually emulating a repeater. So if you put it on simplex, it doesn't work. Or it doesn't work consistently, or it doesn't work well. I don't either. Welcome to the Chinese radios. Welcome to Anytone. Yes. Or just experiment until you get the working correct way to do it. Welcome to ham radio. Right. Now this is something specific to PyStar and to Anytone radios because they put in this silly DMR mode selector. It worked just fine without it before, but they put it in and messed it up. Okay. All right. So that is done. That channel's done. Okay. So that's the first channel for a simplex hotspot. Questions? Contact name is going to be whichever talk group you want to talk on. For this one, it's going to be test. The Bradmeister test one that you created, right? Cool. All right. Let's move on to our actual emulated repeater thing. So in the Anytone software, you can just do next, bottom. And the other softwares, for this one, you can down at the bottom, you can click the add. Notice down here, it'll tell you there's channels 1 of 1. So there's only one channel there. If you want to be able to program another channel, you actually have to add it before you can actually start editing the next channel. Whereas in the Anytone, it assumes that there's a list, and you just go to the next one on the list. Okay, so for this one, we actually have separate transmit and receive frequencies. We have, yes? Are you sure? The first frequency is 0.55. The second one is 0.45. Oh, actually, I goofed. All right, hold on. Time out. Someone give me a pen. The receive frequency on both of the hotspot 2 channels should be 433.45 for the receive frequency. Yes. I feel stupid. I will demonstrate with the correct frequencies. Too many freaking, which is why I use the talk group names and not the numbers, Doug. And thankfully, you only have to do that once in the contact list. All right. hotspot 2 test. Okay? The receive frequency of the radio, which is the transmit frequency of the hotspot 438.45. The transmit one should be 433.45. Standard 5 megahertz split. Everybody with me? Okay. We need to set our channel mode to digital. All right, we need to set our emit criteria to color code. Over here, transmit contact, again, BM test. Again, we're using the same list, so we don't have to go back and re-add it because we're selecting from a list, so it's already in the list. This time, though the color code is 1, the repeater slot on this one is actually, 98 is on repeater slot 1, not 2. And the receive list, again, I'm going to do my BM all cheat. Okay. This is repeater 2, which is .45. 438.45, 433.45. Okay. Let's do that in the any tone. Come on. Hotspot 1 test. 438.45, 433.45. Digital transmit permit, same color code. DMR mode, repeater. Contact is BM test. Color code is 1. Slot is 1. Receive group is cheat. And that one is done. Okay. Now, here's where it's going to get fun. We're going to go ahead and click OK there. And over here, we're going to stay where we are. Hotspot 1, hotspot 2 test. Okay. Now, if you're in the CPSs that look like this, watch carefully. I'm going to save you some time. We're going to add a channel. We need to program this second channel, but we don't want to have to type everything else in. On the left side, you can right-click on the channel name, copy. Then you can click on the new channel name, right-click, paste. The only thing it doesn't change is the channel name, but everything else will be the same. So this we can call hotspot 2 Colorado, or Colo because we can't type it all in. And all we have to do is change the transmit name, which is the talk group, and the repeater slot. And you are done. Copied it over. Everything else was copied over. The only thing it doesn't copy over is the channel name. But you do then have to change the talk group name, the talk group that you're transmitting on, and the repeater slot to the appropriate settings. It saves you time. See? Cheats. Okay. Question.
Same typo.
Correct. Right. Okay, it's the same repeater. Other question? Okay, let's show that on the anytone. So on the anytone, again, it already assumes that it's part of that the list is there. It's just an empty thing. So we can go here to this thing, right click. Did that let me copy? Let me see. Boom. Same thing, but you have to do it from the list. So you click at that first square, right click copy, and go to here, right click paste. But then you have to double click it, change the channel name, right? I'll need to do something. I'll come back to it. So hotspot to Colorado. No, won't let me. Okay. And then again, change the talk group, change the repeater slot. And I just realized that I messed something up on here. This second one should be hotspot 2 test, not 1. Copy and paste is your friend. Because not only will it copy over everything else, but it'll also copy your transmit admit settings. It copies your DMR mode settings. Everything gets copied. One of the ways you can keep your channel lists consistent. Questions? All right. No. What do you think this is? An actual high quality program? I would have to change the resolution of my screen, and it's going to wreak havoc with the system. So, yeah. Now, yeah, and if it's scaled correctly without a reboot, I might do that. While we're sitting here for this example, I want you guys, because we did this as if you're programming channels, but I want you to go back in here and change each of these channels to low power. Because we're in the same room as the hotspot, we do not need to be blowing out the RF here. Because we're good citizens. Obviously. Faraday. Low. Microwave ham. High RF. We put the hot in hotspot. All right. Now, question. What software? Okay. So what you have to do, the 878 on the channel. So see where it says contact and there's this big box here? Click it. And what do you get? You should see something like this where there's a blocky list. You get that? Okay. Which one of those do you want to choose? Okay, so what you do is you put your mouse over that and double click it. Do 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 do. Click the contact. Click the here. That was me that did that.
Yep.
Double click the one you want to change it to. Yeah, because these are your receive groups. Oh, that means that your transmit contacts. So go ahead and close this window. So the receive group list here. Oops, sorry, I'm touching your screen. Ah, it's touch screen.
I've got it here.
So click it. You're done.
Okay.
It selected it.
This, if I go.
Uh-huh. Double click it. What is it listed at now? Do it again. You're not considering the alternative. Crappy software.
Yeah.
This is the correct setting. So close that. Close this. Go to your talk groups. Just click on talk groups. Now go back and click on channel. Very top. Yeah, crappy software. You're overthinking it. You're giving this software more credit than it deserved. All right. No, it's because we're nice people. All right. What's the last thing we need to do? Nope. That's not the last thing we need to do. Zones. Okay, so we're going to save this so that we don't lose our precious progress. Okay. Let's go into our zone. I'm going to create a zone. We're going to call this Workshop. And we're going to add all of our channels into the Workshop zone. The other software zone, am I still on? Is my audio hot? Good. Okay. Where's my zones? There they are. Nope. Zone information. Here we go. So we're going to change this. I'm going to call this Workshop. Changing it. Hotspot 1, Hotspot 2 test, Hotspot 3 test. Okay. There we go. Now we save. Congratulations, you just did basic programming on your DMR radio. Now, who was to be brave and upload this code plug into the radio and give us a transmit test? All right, so what I need to do, who's my volunteer? Okay. Let me know when you're done. So what you want to do is select Hotspot 1 test. The Hotspot 1 test channel is the one that you want to select. Is on low power. So go ahead and key up and speak your call sign, please.
I just turned it off and turned it back on. I thought it was a volume. It was. So it's rebooting.
Nobody else has ever done that, right? I remember the time when I released a code plug where it actually turned off the volume indicator, and I couldn't figure out how to put it back in there. Everybody's radio was like, I can't see the volume. Love it. Are you ready? Hit the button and hit and say your call sign. Very good. You're into my hotspot now. I can tell if you look at the screen. What are you seeing? That means, and that is your radio ID. 3183448. So your programming was successful, sir. Now, the reason I did this is actually on my hotspot, I can control which call signs are allowed out. And I only allow my own call signs out. So this allows me to let you transmit and see if it worked without actually going out onto Brainmeister. Would you like to go out on Brainmeister? You want to go live? Sure. Okay. Here we go. Yes.
So I went in and dutifully set the model type for my 878 to US amateur.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I try to push the code plug to the radio, it says wrong model type.
And what is your, so if you go back to model type now, does it still say US amateur?
Yes.
Oh, wow. How did you get a radio that wasn't US amateur? We're gonna, that is an offline topic. That is, again, one of the problems with the anytones. We'll have to talk offline about that. Okay. So we're going to go to the dashboard. Actually, I have to go to configuration, actually. Because what I have to do is I have to allow your call sign, or your radio ID. Please repeat your radio ID for me.
I have memorized it, so I'll call it up here.
I could go back to the live logs.
318.
318.
3448.
3183448. Okay, let me apply the changes. And what we'll also do, Brandmeister, last heard. Something about the Brandmeister website, if you ever go there, it's not fast. We're going to add in a search, add a rule, destination ID equals 98. Search. All right. Very good. So I have you in 3183448. Back to the screen. Okay. Are you ready? So what you want to do is, this is call sign testing. Because again, this is a test talk group. Whenever you're ready.
This is KD0LAF testing.
So you can see the local RF activity at the bottom. Go to Brandmeister. And if we pause, at the top we can see there is your call sign with yours going out through my hotspot ID to radio test 98. Questions? Somebody was trying to go out. Didn't all come through though. K6EEN. You can see that right there. That came through your radio, so that was all set up for receive as well. Anybody else want to take a shot? No other brave souls. Okay. It is 11 o'clock. At this point, this is now open forum, open workshop. If you have other things you want to talk about, even roaming, we can open up the floor for other topics and other questions. Hold on, guys. Willem, which list did you want to see?
Just put up the list of everything that I just received. I just want to see if this radio actually transmits. I don't think it does.
The list of receive? Well, this will show if you try to transmit out. The reject list. Let me get the live logs. And go. There it is, 1108230. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Question.
All right, so I'm starting out. New radio. What repeaters should I be selecting?
Well, that's a very actual apropos question that I'm just going to bring up. So, RMHAM has sample code plugs. Okay? Now, I am working on rebooting mine from scratch, so they're a little behind. And I'm actually going to have to ask for some test subjects here very quick. I've got the Anytone one built. I just need someone to test it to make sure all the numbers are correct. So here are the sample code plugs. Lots of Motorola ones, and then the ones that for Anytone Connect systems, the Titera radios and whatnot. These, and the reason why I saved this to last is because I want you guys to learn how to program your own radios. Okay? The sample code plugs are always meant as a starting point, not as a end-all be-all. That's why they're called sample code plugs. Right? The idea is not for a small group of people to be the central point for adding things to everybody's code plug in the world. That's not a sustainable model. Right? They're there to get you off the ground. So the sample code plugs will have all of the RMHAM DMR repeaters in there on the UHF side. And that's a carryover from the fact that until not too long ago, there were only single band radios in that world. Okay? A very, very good practice to see if you can get, when you get these, to add the VHF channels in because it gives you programming experience. The only thing that changes is that the numbers are different for the frequencies. The process is the same. Okay? So these samples are available. download them, load them into your CPS, take a look at them. Use them as a learning tool. Okay? We highly encourage you to edit them, rearrange the zones, right? Make your own channel lists and zone lists. Do whatever you want to it. It's what they're there for. It's just a starting point. With all the RMHAM repeaters already in so you can get on the air. Just don't forget to change your radio ID. Okay. Outside of that, it's up to you, right? Brandmeister does have a map, oddly enough, that is populated by active repeaters and hotspots. As I said, the Brandmeister site can be a little slow, even on the most powerful laptops and computers. So if you bring this up and it's blank, wait. It will populate. If it still hasn't come up, wait. Right? So we're going to zoom in. Alrighty. There is this layers over here. What it's showing is repeaters, what it's not showing is hotspots. Why does it show hotspots? Oh, this is so fantastic. Give me that. Stations, positions, repeaters. Not showing hotspots. Great. Come on. That's a change. So there used to be a selection here to where it'll show hotspots. Now it's not going to show hotspots. But what it does for the repeaters that are there, you can click on the repeater. It's going to give you the basic information for a repeater. If you want more detailed information, click on the call sign of the repeater. This is the Parker Repeater Association's repeater. And this will give you all this information, including a very basic map, coverage map. RF coverage maps down here. So over here, here's your transmit and receive frequency. Here is your color code. Here are the static talk groups on the 2 repeater slots. Everything's there. Right? So if you ask, like, what repeater should I be adding? Who do you want to talk to? What repeaters are in your area? That you have to research on your own. There's no magic bullet for that. You can get the repeater book, but please understand the repeater book is only published so often. And especially in terms of Brandmeister repeaters and whatnot, the information changes constantly. So you can use it as a beginning guide, but the internet is going to be your best way of finding current relevant information. Did I answer your question? Okay. All right, who wants to talk about roaming? Okay. Yes. So, let's talk about frequency coordination. So exciting, right? How many people here know that in order to get frequencies for your actual repeater, that there's an organization that coordinates all that? How many people here think that you shouldn't have to do that for your hotspot? Of course you have to do that with your hotspot. It's RF. So by coordination, what I mean is that it's already been coordinated for you. If you go to ccarc.net, you'll notice that now there is a use plans and hotspots menu. If you mouse over that, there's a frequency use plan selection. There's also a CC guidelines on hotspot selection. Now the hotspot frequencies right now are UHF because the vast majority of hotspots today are UHF only. Okay? They have already set aside frequencies for your use.
There are no VHF frequencies set for hotspots. There's nothing in the plans. So if you choose to do this on VHF, your mileage may vary and people may yell at you. So you're taking your use in your own hands.
So if you have a hotspot, Doesn't matter what kind of hotspot you have, whether it's a Pi-Star-based hotspot, whether it's one of the open spots. Please, for the sake of everybody involved, use one of these frequencies. Okay, use one of these frequencies. Okay, for those hotspots that allow you to do full duplex, separate send and receive frequencies, standard 5 megahertz offset, and in this case that would be negative offset. So if you choose 438.5 for your hotspot transmit frequency, your hotspot receive frequency should be 433.5. Just like it is in the example here when it's actually corrected and I didn't mess up. Willem.
No, that's
Very good. In fact, if you look down here, this is something that I was looking for when I got it, and it's like, yes, I'm glad this is here, right? If a hotspot is operating full duplex, receive frequency in the hotspot should be 5 megahertz lower. It's right there on the page in case you forget. In the back. Okay. Change it. Change it. Please. Yeah. Now, now I'm being facetious, but let me be absolutely honest. Those are defaults, right? Every state has their own frequency coordination, right? So that might be fine in California or Florida or whatnot. In Colorado, please use one of these frequencies. Yeah. Yeah.
In the channel plan
Yeah.
for DMR.
So we do
So-
ask you kindly to change that on your device for Colorado. Yes.
Can I make a quick comment, Mike?
Certainly.
As a former frequency coordinator, no longer the frequency coordinator, I'll point out, and that would be Tracy KI0HC, who I don't think is here today, but you're using the word coordinated a lot, and to Tracy, that means you have coordinated your repeater with him. He has acknowledged your frequencies. He's given you a authorization to go on air. It's kind of like talking to an air traffic controller and getting permission to take off.
Right.
What Mike is saying is these hotspot channels are recommended or allocated by the council for shared use.
Yes.
The council is not going to coordinate you
Right.
on these hotspot channels. Please don't send Tracy lots of
No.
messages
No.
when you're trying to coordinate a less than 1 watt, as it says here.
Yep.
Is this is the actual CCARC page we're looking at?
Yes.
Online?
The
Okay.
actual device.
So he did this such that you could, it's kind of like a shared aircraft field. You declare your intent to land and to use the runway, and you have to play nice with the other children in the sandbox.
They're kind of-
If you are going to do a 10 watt, or you think, hey, I'm going to put up a 50 watt repeater using my little hotspot from my backyard, then you need to talk to Tracy and get a coordinated frequency, because your little hotspot, by putting that amplifier on it, you've turned it into a weapon of mass destruction, and they need to coordinate that. And John is saying 44655 is an auxiliary pair or a linking pair by the Colorado standard. And it's right now analog only. In the case of band plans, every state, every repeater council may have a different. It may differ from what the ARRL publishes.
Yep.
You need to go to your local and try to abide, but if you're always welcome to use anything you want, but if you interfere with a lot of things, the FCC is going to come knocking at your door.
Bottom line here is that use one of these frequencies, please. Now here's a funny story. These hotspots are built on basically 2 hardware components, a Raspberry Pi and a GPIO hat, which is basically a board that plugs into GPIO pins that does the radio functions, right? That the software then interacts with. Used to be that most of these hotspot hats were manufactured with the same chips and whatnot, but they were left on a default frequency that was not only outside the amateur radio band, but was actually on a some kind of moonbeam communication frequency. So it was actually interfering with satellites. So eventually they figured out what was going on, and they contacted the maintainer of the firmware and said, please change this. So now the latest firmware actually defaults to a frequency setting that keeps it out of that range, and you can't actually tune it outside of the range, which is, they finally got that fixed. So funny story about frequencies and whatnot. Okay, let's talk about roaming. What is roaming? Yeah. It's a chicken on the range. Yeah. So roaming is a radio feature. It may have been a new concept again in amateur radio, but in the corporate world, it's something that was very common. Essentially, the way that works in radio is that you set a number of channels into a roam list. The radio listens on those channels to see which one is receiving the strongest signal from, and then it changes to that channel. So this allows you to move in a car, and periodically it'll check, and it'll retune to the repeater that is getting the strongest signal from. Great for when you're doing trunk kind of things. It's great if you're roaming on the same talk group. Outside of that, it is completely and utterly useless. Because if you put several channels in there, and they're all mixed talk groups, how do you know which channel and what talk group it's going to land on? You don't, which makes it pretty much useless. But in certain use cases, let's imagine when we do like a support for a bicycle race, and we're in the north part of the state, and we're using the north talk group as our communication channel, right? That's a perfect use case, especially if you're a chaser. So you can create a roam list with all the north channels in the roam list, and let the radio figure out which one is going to be the strongest signal, so you don't have to keep there changing channels in order to stay with the strongest repeater. That's a fantastic use case. If you're going up and down I-25 and you want to be able to monitor Rocky Mountain, same thing, right? But if you any kind of use case where you have to have more than one talk group channel in the roam list, it becomes useless because you never know where you're going to end up. How many Chinese non-Kenwood and mineral radio support roaming? Any tone? Right. Yeah. Only the anytones. The Hytera 782D one did, but you can only put 128 channels in it. So that particular radio tended to fall out of favor. It was basically just a rebadged Hytera commercial radio that they gave you the free software for and tried to pass it off as an amateur radio, but the amateur radio folks called them on their BS pretty quick. It was too expensive, and it was more expensive than the Anatone radio with like a third of the features. Other questions? Sure.
I want to know what repeater house. I happen to be in Highland.
Oh. So let me do this, because I think this is where you're going with this question. Let me put this up here so you know this is stuff and things. There's a link on here, I think. Where'd it go? Yes. This link here. Okay. Says Doug.
So the question on the floor was, I live in Highlands Ranch, what repeater can I access? If you go to rmham.org and you click on the DMR site information, that's going to list all of the repeaters. And on the left side of that, in the first part of the website, there's a coverage map that's clickable for each of the repeaters. In the Denver metro area, you're looking at pretty much anything that lists for Denver. So that would be Boulder South, that would be Lookout Mountain in Golden, which is Denver Central. That would be Squaw Mountain, which is Denver West. That would be West Creek, which is Douglas County. And that would be Devil's Head, which is also, I believe, listed as Douglas County. And they pretty much work anywhere in the Front Range. Even on a handheld, those work. Lookout is a little impaired in spots, but it does work in the Denver metro area, and it will work fine on UHF. VHF has got an issue that we're looking into.
Can I build on that? Yes. So I'm going to build on what John said. This is Doug, K2AD. I would do what John said, but first, before you do that, and you said Highlands Ranch? What I would do is say, what talk group or program content do you want to talk to? If you say, I want to get to Rocky Mountain Wide, talk group 700, I would then say, okay, you're going to select, all you need to do at a minimum is pick the nearest repeater or a repeater that covers your area well and put that in there. You don't, some people think, well, I've got to put Thord in, I've got to put Squaw, I've got to put all of these. You only have to pick one. So that's where I would start. I would say, what repeater networks, what repeater talk groups? When I say a repeater network, I guess I mean a program content. Think of Rocky Mountain Wide as a TV channel. That's your CNN channel. And you go to Central, and that's your Fox News, and you go to South, and that's MSNBC. It's program content. It's people. Then say, okay, I want the Denver one, the Central, I want the Wide. Pick a local repeater to you and put it in your radio and make sure it works. Then you might say, well, down in where you are, I can get into, it's probably going to be Squaw Mountain. But I can also, well, I can kind of see Thornton. I'm going to put that in as a backup for when Squaw maybe goes offline. Work your way down the list. You could look at the Lookout Local, which is intended to be a Denver single site, and I think it still is single site. But just because it's a local doesn't mean it's always going to be one repeater, but it's a limited repeater set because it's a local set. You might decide, well, I'd also like to listen in on the northern things. Pick the one northern repeater that's closest to you, put it in your radio.
And hope you can get to it.
You've got these coverage maps. That's the way I would approach it, of do what John said, but first figure out what you want to put in there. Otherwise, you're going to be programming in a boatload of channels, and the chances of fat fingering something and it not working is going to be high. I have never fat fingered and not had things work 4 times in one day. Typically, I make that mistake about 3 times a day when I'm working on code plugs. It's going to happen.
Now,
So-
in the presentation, and this is something you can download a copy of this on the website.
And the final thought is, start with a standardized code plug.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's what you were going to say.
Because that's our thing. So there's a tool that I've listed on the final page in the stuff and things that's called the Interactive DMR Repeater Map. If you copy that link, this is something that I put up there. Now, this is a tool. It is an approximation. It is not a promise. Okay. As soon as it comes up. Any minute now. Oh, don't tell me Bitly's down. Oh no, this is embarrassing. Okay, I can get to Google. Okay. Oh, there it is. Nope, that's not it. Still going. Oh, phew, thank goodness. I built this little map. Now, the only thing that this map will help you determine is where your nearest repeater is approximately geographically. What it will not do is tell you what the coverage of that repeater is. So it might be close to you, but the coverage may be in the opposite direction, but it's a starting point. Okay? So if I scroll in here to the Highlands Ranch area, here's Highlands Ranch, right? You've got all these repeaters around you. Some of these may be on the mountain, some of these may be on the opposite slope of the mountain. If you click on it, it'll tell you which repeater it is. So that's West Creek, right? This one is Denver Squaw, right? Now here's the funny part. Here's Squaw, or the mountain previously known as Squaw. Here is, I believe that's Thornton. There's Thornton, right? Boulder is way up there. Now I live, I don't see, I can tell where my little cursor is. There's my apartment right there, right? My best signal between those three is out to the Boulder repeater. Not the Squaw, not the Thornton, but the Boulder. And I can actually go into our internal things and see what my signal strength is. And it's all the best signal strength from my radio is from that location is always going into the Boulder repeater. With a mobile. Mobile and a base station antenna. I think 25.
So, all right, so there it is. I picked it here. What do I do? Just
So,
listen for the
so this is assuming that you're picking a repeater from RMHAM. Okay, RMHAM has 5 major talk groups. Okay, the largest of which is Rocky Mountain. The vast majority of our repeaters will have Rocky Mountain talk group on time slot 1. So if you key in and talk on that talk group, it's going to light up the entire Christmas tree. Everybody's going to hear you, yada, yada, yada. Okay? We also have North, which are in here, in this particular map, North are the yellow dots. Okay? We have South, which are the red dots. We have Central, which are the blue dots. Okay? We also then have, it used to be the major one was Lookout Local, which is just one repeater, so it's not shared out. It's just that one local repeater in downtown Denver. So that became like our main rad chew repeater, so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the network. So really it's about, okay, so we have the repeater identified. You figure out on that repeater which talk groups it's going to have. Generally speaking, it's going to be Rocky Mountain on time slot 1 and some other geographic talk group on time slot 2. Right? So then so let's take Lookout. No, let's not take Lookout. Let's take Squaw, or the one formerly known as Squaw. Squaw will have Rocky Mountain, and it'll have Central. So you'll see 2 channels in your code plug in the sample. You'll see Squaw, Rocky Mountain, Squaw, Central. Okay? So you know that you're tuning in to the Squaw repeater and which talk group that you're going to be on. Right? It's already programmed for you, so you don't have to worry about which repeater slot is on because the channel is already programmed. Okay? So you just tune to whichever one of those channels you want to talk on, and off you go.
So the Central will only talk to all everybody.
Correct.
But
Correct.
Rocky Mountain does the whole.
Correct. Yeah. It's I mean, so again, our northernmost repeater is in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Our southernmost repeater is on Sandia Mountain in Albuquerque. Our easternmost repeater is out in Burlington. Our westmost repeater, those wouldn't be in Burlington. Our westmost ones are out here in Rangeley, Grand Junction, Montrose. We also have some down here in the Four Corners region as well, but those are south. So on Central, it goes that way, right? But for Rocky Mountain, it goes the whole kit and caboodle. So now, what I always say is that if you're just trying to find someone to talk to, right? You don't know who you want to talk to. You just want to do, anybody out there? This is blah blah blah. Let's have a chat, right? Not a radio check, but an actual call to talk to somebody that you want to do. You want to do some talking. Call out on Rocky Mountain and see who responds back. If that person is in a local area where you can go to one of these regional talk groups, you can then change over to the regional talk group. So you're down here in Highlands Ranch. You find someone, they're on a South talk group. The Devil's Head repeater has the South talk group. You can say, hey, let's switch over to South talk group. You go to South talk group on Devil's Head that you presumably can get to. They go to a South talk group on one of the other South repeaters, and then you can talk to each other on South. That frees up Rocky Mountain for other people to make contact. If they're talking and say, no, I'm a repeater that I can get to the Central talk group, You can pop over to Squaw Central or Thornton Central, and then you can talk to each other on the Central Talk Group. And again, that frees up Rocky Mountain for other people. If they're in the North Talk Group, you could probably try to get into the North Talk Group through the Boulder repeater. And if you can, great, you can talk on North with the guy, and you can get to chat on North.
So if I can't, then North group.
Rocky Mountain, which is fine, as long as there's nothing wrong with that. If you can at all possibly go to a smaller talk group, cool. That's best practice. That's good operation procedures. That's polite. But if you can't, we understand that you can't. It's huge range. Yeah.
You know, John and I did this repeater talk group layout back in 2010, 2008, and that's when we originally conceptualized the big wide and then the three regionals, North, Central, South. And we intentionally have a major overlap between Central and North, Central and South. We obviously couldn't do overlap with North to South, but so the Boulder Northern covers all the way down almost to the Palmer Divide in there. And that was intentional. That way people could have some interoperability to the other. And now we're doing this overlay with the Eastern, which is mostly the VHF. And that was done for a really crazy reason of the Oxcom and the Aries regions. The Northeast region has this big wraparound and goes all the way down into Lincoln County, down there where Mike, in the lower right-hand corner of his map, where that purple dot is. So we set up the Eastern Talk Group to be able to wrap all the way from Fort Collins down to Lincoln County because of the Aries and Oxcom. But with our partnership with EOSS, and Mike, who's here in the room, is working on a Burlington repeater. We're working on an enhanced Sterling repeater. We have hopes to be able to go up to Julesburg. So you'll see some expansion out in those areas, and that's because a really great, another 501c3 partner of RMHAM, Edge of Space Sciences, does balloon chases out there and balloon launches and recoveries. So they have paid into our network, so you'll hear them occasionally on wide when they're doing a balloon chase up in the northern region. Why are they there? Because they have people down in the south, and they're using the talk group that they need to for the event. And I think it's great that we have activity, and as soon as they get into a mode where everybody they're talking to is in their local region, they switch down to that area. We should do the same. But if you need to use all 24 repeaters across the whole state, do it. Just be cognizant of that. We're also doing expansion out in the west, in south of Grand Junction. We're looking to expand up towards Steamboat. We're going into the middle into, it's not exactly this, but basically nearer to Aspen, to Telluride. We're looking for sites and working with partners out there to expand that area. So, and after that, we'll be looking at down near New Mexico, Colorado border for a little bit more, Raton maybe, but we haven't really planned all that out, but that's in the works, so that's all the more reason to try to have your basic lesser area repeaters.
There was a question back here. Right. So Brandmeister is an organization and a massive network of repeaters and hotspots. Okay. So this is the Brandmeister website. Brandmeister.network, and that throws some people off. It's not .net, it's actually .network. It's very, very loosely coupled. The way the Brandmeister presence in the United States is what they call 3 master servers. Okay? One on the West Coast, one in Texas, one on the East Coast. Okay? And everything in the Brandmeister network is a mesh, so all the servers can talk to each other. So the way that you get into the network is by connecting your hotspot or your repeater to one of these master nodes. And once you're connected in, you're basically connected to the entire Brandmeister network. They have their own list of talk groups, and the default operating intended mode is something that they call user-activated talk groups or dynamic talk groups. Okay, so by default, the repeater will sit there with no talk groups on it. You program your radio with the proper frequency pair, color code, time slot, and then you pick a talk group and program it in. And you key up on that talk group. And when you key up, it'll activate that talk group on that repeater slot on that repeater, and it'll become active. That's all done through the magic of the repeater and the master server that coordinates that particular activity. Now that talk group is active, not only can you talk on that talk group out to the rest of all the other repeaters that are on that talk group, but they can come back and communicate out through your repeater as well, the repeater that you're on. Any user-activated talk group, if you do not key up again from the local side within 10 minutes, I think it's 10 minutes, either 10 or 15, I think it's 10, the talk group will drop on the repeater. So it has to be from your end out, not from the system out the repeater. Okay? The repeater owner can choose to make certain talk groups static so that they never drop. That is their decision. Okay? But there are Brandmeister repeaters all over the world. All right. This replaced the DMR Mark, which used a far more, or as I say, a far less flexible way of doing things. The flexibility of Brandmeister is both its most powerful feature and one of its most frustrating, because everybody and their dog wants their own talk group. But everything is just a talk group. They have talk group 3108. It's just a label. It doesn't keep people from talking about non-Colorado things on the talk group. It's just a label. It's just a way of, it's probably going to be people from Colorado on there, but there's no guarantee. It's still the Wild Wild West. So you can get on the Florida talk group and talk about the New York California football game. There's no restrictions on that about that. But it is a new hotness because you don't have to talk to the repeater owner and say, could you please put this talk group on your repeater? The default behavior is for you just to key up and it happens, right? The other cool thing is that in locations where you don't have a Brandmeister connected repeater, or a repeater at all in some cases, or you're in a dip and you can't get out to the repeaters, you can get one of these hotspots and get online. All you need for the hotspot is an internet connection. The hotspot, you go in, again, you set it up to connect to one of these master servers, off you go. So the Brandmeister is, and right now, is kind of the new hotness in the connected global repeater networks for DMR and amateur radio.
Hey, Mike. RMHAM doesn't really do a lot of Brandmeister,
No.
but who is in the area? I think maybe Denver Radio Club, and I think the Rocky Mountain Radio League offers some Brandmeister.
The Parker Repeater Association
And
as well.
Parker also. So, putting a full repeater on a mountain on Brandmeister is a nice thing if you can afford the site lease to put a repeater to do what they're doing, and DRC and Parker are good examples of that. Yep. RMHAM made the choice. Our site leases are so expensive, we couldn't afford, we didn't believe, after supporting Aries and Oxcom to the level we are, to put a Brandmeister repeater up there so that people could just talk to Kalamazoo. That's what a hotspot in our mind is for. Or go over and support the Denver Radio Club and use theirs, or the RMRL or Parker. They potentially have a little less expensive repeater sites than Thornton Mountain and some of these others that we have to pay a lot of money to be on. So you've got two ways of getting there. We do have, as Mike mentioned, the back doorway into, you can go to your hotspot. And if you're away in California, you can go to your hotspot and say, I want to get to Rocky Mountain Ham Central, and conduit through so that you're reaching what I call our program content, not the California channel or the California-Florida football game channel on Brandmeister. So we do have a presence there, but it's just along with our talk group models, and we're not competing with the other groups' talk group models. It's a very nice cooperative and building upon each other's strengths
Right.
relationship.
If you go to the RMHAM website, you go to down here. Where did we put that? Here it is under Brandmeister. So under Brandmeister, we have this Brandmeister to RMHAM DMR linking page. Okay. It is very, very simple. So once you're connected to Brandmeister, if you talk on this Brandmeister talk group, it will come out onto this RMHAM talk group, and vice versa. So if when you're transmitting on 719 South, it's going out 3108.16 on Brandmeister. Okay? So if you're out of state, you take your little hotspot with you. You set it to set your radios and the hotspot up for 3116. You can transmit onto your hotspot out of state, and it'll come out on the repeater network here. Now you'll notice that Rocky Mountain Talk Group is not on this list. Why is Rocky Mountain not on the list, guys?
Well, we thought it had too much traffic to do that. And one thing here you'll notice that 310801, that doesn't look like a Brandmeister talk group number, a valid number, does it? That's not the numbers that they typically use for talk groups. What we're doing is that is actually our radioid.net assigned unit number for one of the repeaters in our central network. In the very early days, they started 310800. Everything in Colorado was 3108, and they had 2 digits for repeaters, because we'll never have more than 99 repeaters in Colorado, right? So, and RMHAM does have 3108000102. We have a lot of those very low numbers.
Yep.
And what we did is we said, okay, that actually is our officially assigned number for Thornton Mountain. That's where our master repeater for the central network is.
Yep.
So we simply mapped that over into Brandmeister. They don't quite know that they think when you go to that number, you're going to a single repeater, and they're okay with that. They don't quite know that we've actually patched that to about half a dozen, 10 They don't quite know that. They would be a little bit uncomfortable with that, but they don't prohibit it. So we just kind of leave it on the down low.
Yeah.
So if you're having trouble with this, please don't contact Brandmeister, contact us.
Yeah. And the other thing, if you think about it, if we were to put Rocky Mountain on there, and somebody got hold of that talk group on Brandmeister, they could get on and just start drag chewing on it and not talking, and that would tie up the network for consistently. We can cut that link, obviously, but it just would be really annoying.
Well, we have control. So yeah, what Mike is saying is a station in Arizona could be talking to a station in Michigan on our Colorado wide, and we just didn't want that. We also didn't want, there's a major wildland fire Oxcom and Aries is using, and then people in Florida just check in to say, is there anything I can do to help from Tallahassee? No. Other than send rain.
Send all of your life savings to our RMHAM donation box.
So that's why we didn't do it.
Yeah. All right. Here's something I want to put on. So we know that all the radios in a repeater network, a DMR repeater network, have to have a radio ID. As you may have noted from what Doug said, all the repeaters in the network also have a repeater ID. What about hotspots? Hotspots need an ID? Yes, they do. So how do you go about getting a hotspot ID? If you have a radio ID, you already have one. So if you notice here, I've been using 3108111 because that's one of my radio IDs. Note the repeater ID. 3108111 with 01 tagged to the end of it. This is the way Brandmeister recommends doing your repeater IDs for your hotspots. Okay? So if I go into the configuration here, if you look at down here in the configuration, here is my radio, this is my radio ID because you have to specify your radio ID to show that, yes, I'm part of DMR, I have a radio ID, that's all on the up and up. If I go down here to my DMR configuration for Brandmeister, it asks for a ESS ID, which is a fancy way of saying an extension on your SSID, and you just choose one of these from the drop-down list to extend it to make your hotspot ID. Okay? I won't tell you how many of these I have currently in use. It's more than one. It's more than these two. That one's 01. This one is 02. That's a different one. Make sense? So the cool thing is if you have a radio ID, you already have a built-in way of putting in a hotspot ID when you get a hotspot. No further work necessary on that front. All right, we talked about roaming. Yes, I beat that horse to death. Good. Okay, scan list. Can't believe we haven't talked about scan list. What is a scan list? Anybody that's not an RMHAM member? Cheating. Anybody want to guess what a scan list is? It's a list of channels to scan. That's all it is, right? Here's the fun part. You remember when I told you that the road to hell is paved with flexibility? Every single channel in your code plug is individually assigned a scan list. Where is that in here? Here it is right there. Okay? Which means, theoretically, hypothetically, you can have a different scan list for every channel in your code plug. Or a channel of 50, or a different set of 10. It doesn't matter, right? So these scan lists are handled just like anything else in your code plug, and this is universal from all code plugs. They all work this way, with the exception of some old Vertex standard stuff, which we won't talk about because you have a scan list. Create a scan list, you give it a name, scan list 1. You choose the channels you want in that scan list. Okay? Create another scan list, call it scan list 2. I choose 2 different channels or whatever for that scan list, right? Now that I have my list of lists, I go to my channel. I can then choose from the scan list which scan list I want to assign to that channel. So every channel in the whole code plug can have a different scan list. Every channel that you assign to a zone can have a different scan list. And the way that you know what channels you're going to scan is that you have to know, okay, which channel do I have active? Which scan list is assigned to this channel? What channels are in that scan list? Okay? You can make this incredibly complicated. Probably best not to do that if you want to keep your sanity. Okay? Simplify it. But what that basically means is that if you want to be able to activate a scan list to scan, you need to know what channel you want to assign those scan lists to so that you know when you activate that channel, you hit the scan button on your radio, those are the channels that are going to scan. Okay? It can get really complicated very fast. So if you have a zone with a bunch of channels, do the channels in that zone have to match the channels that are in the scan list that you assign to the channels in that zone? No, they do not have to match. Depending on how you want to do it. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The road to hell is paved with flexibility. Yep. Uh-huh. And a scan list. Yep. That's a very good question. All right. So we've got a scan list. We've got channels in the scan list, and it's in the scan actually hits a channel and stops. When you hit your transmit button at that point, once that drops and you're on the tail or whatever, what happens when you hit the transmit button? The answer to that question is, it depends. It's my favorite answer. And it depends on how you set up the scan list. Okay? Because down here, you have all these things like revert channel. You have priority channels. You have, where's the talkback channel? Is that on here? Dropout delay, priority channels, revert channel. So one of these is last called or last heard, depending on how it is done. So here's talkback. Talkback for nannytone is the talkback to the channel that last heard, right? So this will be selected plus talkback. What do these mean? Check the help file. If they're not cleared, it'll tell you what it means. Selected plus talkback when there's no signal during scanning. Push the top button on the initial channel. When there is signal, press push the top transmit of the channel with signal. So if it's sitting there scanning, right, and you hit transmit, it's going to transmit on whatever channel you set. You have a scan list on Boulder Rocky Mountain, and those channels are going through. You hit talk, it'll transmit on Boulder Rocky Mountain. Okay? If it stops on your analog channel and it's transmitting, and during the tail, before the scan continues, you hit talk, it's going to transmit on the 448 analog channel, on that analog channel. It does not have to be in the zone. All that matters is what is in the scan list. The magic of the flexibility, the road to hell of scan lists. It gets very confusing very quickly. I highly recommend that you simplify your scan list experience. And I say this with much more fervor than before because scan lists in the amateur radio world are far more useful than roaming for a broader range of use cases.
And on that note, a good operating technique is if you key up and say, this is K0ABC,
Right.
say what talk group you're on.
I should mention that because we're talking about programming here and not operating practices. So the operating practice is when you key up on any DMR radio and amateur radio, ID your talk group. Because most people aren't watching their screen, or maybe they're away from the screen, or maybe even they're driving. And you just key up, this is K0NGA, and the scan starts again. How do I know to get back? How do I get back to the person that called? You don't, because the talk group is probably going to be scanning more than one talk group, right? But if I say this is K0NGA on Rocky Mountain, oh, stop the scan. Make sure I'm careful, tune to a Rocky Mountain channel, and key up, and I can get back to the person.
5-minute warning, Mike.
Okay. So when you transmit out and you're making a call, ID your talk group. It is best practice, and it'll be a much more enjoyable experience for you. Last questions.
From the chat. The link, or let's see, the map you had up, the Google map you had up, is that link available?
In the presentation, the last page of the presentation, it's the interactive DMR map that you see on the screen there. There's the link. It's on that page. It's also on the DMR information page of the website. Other questions? Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. This was useful. If you want to get a hold of me after this, please email me, k0nga@arrl.net.